Let's get this thing started.
Let's do it.
Would you like to hit the record button?
I would love to.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Tonight, I got Jack Rabinowitz sitting with me. He's a graduate of the West Virginia University with his degree in philosophy and political science. He is now attending the University of Texas School of Law. He interned in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and also in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2022. Now you're here in Austin, Texas. And I met him at a concert through my prior guest, Dom Francis, who by the time this episode releases, you'll have seen and watched that and hopefully enjoyed that one. Jack, welcome to your episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, David. Looking forward to it.
What's your first drink going to be today?
I'm going to go with Buffalo Trace. I've had it before. It's a classic, easy to start off with.
It's good. I got that one at the same time I got the... I also got us this Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey by Bank Street, aged 5 years. It's a special edition reserve that the guy at Total Wine & More told me that we had to try. So this one I resisted. I was like, I'm keeping the seal on until you show up. But the Buffalo Trace, I poured some last night, and it was it's delicious.
Good stuff. Well, I'm looking forward to trying both.
All right, let me get caught up here. And cheers to your first episode, my friend.
First ever podcast episode.
First ever podcast episode.
Yeah.
That's good.
It is. Good stuff.
That'll do. That'll put a little bit more hair on that chest down
That'll
there.
do, yeah.
That'll do. So, did you come to Austin because of the school, or how did you make it out from Virginia to Austin specifically?
Yeah, so I did. I came down for law school. There's a lot of great things to be said about UT Law School, but really for me it was the best option, financially in terms of potential job opportunities. So I was considering a few schools, came down and visited. I loved Austin, I loved the school, and it seemed like the right place to be for the next couple years at least, hopefully longer.
Well, welcome. I'm personally glad to have you here. And I'm sure, did you know, outside of Dom, I forget if I asked you this, did you know anyone else here before you showed up?
Yeah, I knew Dom's sister.
Okay. What was her name again? I forget.
Michaela,
that's right.
No, so really just Dom. I'd met Michaela a couple times, but and he moved down, I guess, a year or so before I did. He graduated WVU a year before I did, and, if you'd told me even a month before Dom moved down here that the both of us would be down here, or even after Dom moved down here that the both of us would be down here, I'd say you were lying to me. I really didn't see it coming, but the admissions process is, a lot of up in the air and just sort of seeing what happens, and this is what happened.
Same with me in the sense of if you had told me in 2021 or earlier that in September of 2023, I'll be living in Texas with a podcast with 30 plus episodes, I'd be like,
yeah,
get out of here, But that's cool that I feel like we both have the ability to sort of navigate our way towards our goals and whatnot. I have 3 icebreaker questions for you.
Let's do it.
This comes from a list. I heard them talking about it in another podcast, so I looked it up. And if you recognize the questions, let me know, because I forget the site it was from. But there's 31 questions. I chose 3 that I thought 3 would be interesting for you. I think they're supposed to be considered like the first one's like easy or should be easy, and then the second one's like a little bit maybe harder to answer, and then the third one's maybe even a little bit harder to answer. But number 1 is, what would constitute a perfect day for you?
Ooh. That's the easy one.
Yeah.
A perfect day for me. Well, all right, a perfect day for me when I'm not working, when I don't have anything to do, which I think would be the perfect day for most people, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not waking up just thinking I want to go work. I'd wake up early, cup of coffee, eggs, bacon, toast, and then I'd go for a hike somewhere, really ideally somewhere back in Appalachia, Virginia, West Virginia. I love it. I grew up sort of, outside there, and, it always a special place in my heart. And we talked briefly before the podcast started about just great food. So I think, after a hike, come back, go to a great restaurant and get a really nice meal, and then retire early.
What's your, do you have a go-to, it's not genre, you got like barbecue, sushi, do you have a specific category of food that you do lean towards on those nights you want to go out?
That's a great question. I really don't. I'm a big fan of trying different things and mixing it up. I love Thai food. I love Indian food. I've yet to find my really like great Indian spot in Austin, but that's sort of for lack of trying. It's not to say that spot's not out there. I just haven't put in the legwork yet.
I have a list that someone just sent me yesterday of like 30 things that she wants to do in Austin. So I'll scan it and see if there's any Indian or Thai places on there. Maybe that could be a starting point for you.
Heck yeah.
All right, question number 2. Is there anything that you've dreamed of doing for a long time, and have you or have you not acted on it?
Gosh, I have been thinking about going to law school for quite some time. So in that sense, I'm doing that. It's really cool. It feels great in a lot of ways. It's a ton of work, but it's very rewarding a lot of the time. I think, the thing I really dream of doing, and the reason I'm here is doing some sort of impact litigation where I can, represent clients and make a difference both in their lives and in policy or in the way that laws are applied, and hopefully make the country and the world a little bit better of a place.
I love that, man. And it's cool because you're actually doing something about it. Like I just had the episode that released today with Nikita Tyumkin. I hope I didn't pronounce your name, Nikita. I haven't practiced it in a while. But he had this like little 60-second bit where he was like, I love it when I see people who just do and they take action, and they're not just, sitting on their high horse talking about how the world is a terrible place or talking about how people suck, but they've actually put their mind to something, in this case, going to law school, and have a game plan, and every day you're just taking little baby steps to get to that ultimate goal.
Yeah, and, one of the really cool things about being in law school is I feel like I'm surrounded by people like that, and so many people who have this idea of what they want to do, and they're out there doing the thing, they're getting after it, and it's not easy. It's 3 years of hard work, but I'm surrounded by people who are committed to doing that. It's pretty cool. It's
awesome. I can attest to that as well. When I look at like the pictures of the prior guests that are up here, it's just crazy to me, some of the people that have come on the show. All of them, every single person, including you. I'm like, I met Dom through someone else, which led to me randomly going to a concert because I just happened to be free, and then we hit it off, and here you are, and this is a great life.
Yeah.
So, good stuff. All right, number 3. When did you last cry in front of another person?
When did I last cry in front of another person? It probably would have been over this past summer. So, it hasn't been too long, a couple of months, and it was in front of my mom. I don't remember exactly what led to it, but we were talking about something, and we had gotten into an argument over something, and, one thing led to another, and got to talking about, much deeper things that sort of led to confrontation. And nobody wants to argue with their mom, and so, yeah.
No, I definitely not. I think the last argument with my mom, if memory serves me right, was probably about maybe 4 years ago. But it was during the summertime, and one of my sisters was there. And yeah, man, it sucked, especially because, me and my mom, we never argue. And I try not to use never that much, but, outside of that argument, I can't even think of the last time before that. That's how rare it is. Second part of this question, when was the last time you cried by yourself?
It actually would probably be further back than that. I tend to not cry alone. I feel like it's normally, I don't know if this is related to me being an extrovert, but it's normally social situations that sort of bring out emotions for me and make me emotional. And I tend to, I think when I get out of those social situations, either I've, expressed the emotion there, or I kind of just move on from it and archive it, I guess. Probably not that healthy.
Probably not that.
If there are any therapists listening to this,
hit them up.
yeah, please.
What are your thoughts on therapy? Have you ever thought about going?
Yeah, I have gone to brief therapy sessions. When I was really little and my parents got divorced, me and my brother went and saw like a child therapist for a bit, and I don't remember a lot from it, but it was a lot of like, hey, I've got Legos, I've got a signed baseball, and like, was it helpful? Probably. I don't know. I don't really remember. More recently, I saw a therapist very briefly who I found to be pretty unhelpful, and I think the way that I think, the way that my brain works is that, when I'm going through something or when something happens to me, I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the way that I react, the way that, I interact with other people around that, the way that, other people treat me and the way that I treat them, and how that may have given rise to the situation. And so this particular therapist that I was talking to didn't really have very much to add on top of that process that I had gone through in my head of thinking it over. And so, I would talk to him about something that had happened and explain to him, what the way I'd handled it and the way that I felt about it. And he would pretty much be like, oh, wow, like sounds like you've got a pretty good handle on that. And I was like, well, clearly not, man, right? Like if I had a good handle on it, I wouldn't be here. So give me something, throw me a bone, right?
My parents went through a divorce back in, it probably was over a decade by now, but at the time the employee that I had, they had it was very similar to like a BetterHelp Online where they didn't have any on-site places you could go, but if you wanted a virtual therapist, you could get one. And she sort of reminded me of, did you watch Ozarks by chance?
I have not watched it all the way through, but I've seen sizable chunks of it. I had a roommate in college who watched it through, and I had nothing better to do. So,
do you happen to remember the therapist they went to in either season 2 or season 3 by chance? Older lady, red hair, and they basically like Marty and I'm forgetting her name, but Marty and his wife would just always get in arguments in front of her, and
I feel like maybe I remember one scene like this. Yeah,
and so at the end of one argument, she says, Marty, just as a pie is only as good as its crust, a marriage is only as good as its trust. And she just had these like Yoda one-liner wisdom lines that she dropped, and that was very much the therapist that I had. Mm-hmm. I did about 6, 7, 8 sessions with her, and she would just say, similar to your guy, she would just say the stuff that was just like, I'm fucking like losing my mind over here, and that's what you got for me is a rhyme.
Yeah. It's funny because I think the way that therapy was portrayed in the media for the longest time, right, when you saw a movie, TV show, was like that. It was just like shrinks are goofy and they're like over analytical and they're doing stuff that's super unnecessary. And now that's completely shifted, right? It's like everyone goes to therapy. You should totally go. It's the greatest thing ever. And so it's more and more rare that you see, representations outside of like comedies where you see a therapist that's just like not really all that helpful. And it's like, well, both things happen.
It is interesting to me, like how present BetterHelp Online is. Just in like, I don't know if do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
I used to. I sold my car when I got to Austin, and my driving time was my listening to podcast time. So that has sort of faded into the background now.
And you're probably super busy even if you did have that car, right? Like that's just not a phase of life you're in.
Yeah, that's true. I can listen to some stuff when I study, but it's mostly instrumental music because it's a lot of reading and writing, and so it's a lot of like if there are words going into my ears, they can't be coming in through my eyes too.
What kind of instrumental music do you like?
Bluegrass largely, which is,
really
sort of a hot take. A lot of people are going to be like, this guy's nuts. Like, how can you listen to banjos in your ear while you're studying? And I will say in my defense, I've found that like the slower bluegrass fiddle stuff tends to play better when I'm studying. But, I'm from Virginia and that region. And so bluegrass music is sort of the roots of the area where it comes from. And so it resonates with me in a lot of ways. I like it, and, the slower bluegrass stuff, I'm able to focus on what I'm doing and still enjoy, having some sort of stimulus, some sort of music.
Yeah. I don't know if this will be considered a hot take or not, but before we got on mics, we were talking about Zach Bryan, and one of my favorite things to do after a workout is to turn him on, go sit in the sauna for 20 minutes, and I just listen to the. If you want, you can take the headphones off, you can take the jacket off.
I think I'm gonna make it work here.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, we talked about this beforehand. I've got an event after this for which I had to be dressed up, and David here was nice enough to put on a collared shirt for me, make me feel a little more at home.
Well, I slightly put it on. I also wore a T-shirt underneath that we're going to reference later on, specifically because of one of the items that you mentioned that you're interested in. But dude, Zach Bryan is so peaceful that I'll turn him on, get in the sauna for 20 minutes, then listen to him the whole way home. He is my post-workout guy right now. And you want me to get a hanger for that, or is that
That's
okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm with you, man. I like Zach Bryan a whole lot. I think anyone who knows me has heard this spiel many, many times now, but country music just generally sucks. And it's such a shame because there's nothing wrong with country music as a genre or the sound. I think the sound of country music is awesome. It's so much fun. Mm-hmm. There's, a huge wide range, sad, slow, upbeat, rock and roll. But people just don't write good country songs. They write the same song over and over and over again, and it's like almost AI generated nonsense most of the time. And so Zach Bryan is the exception to this rule right now in mainstream country, and he's writing really meaningful songs. He's got something to say as an artist, and he's playing country music, and I love it. I think it's awesome.
He's wonderful. I love how on his new album, his first song is a poem.
Yeah.
And it's a great fucking poem.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's good. I can't wait for you to see him. Hopefully I'm going to see him. I'm going to check out that concert. So you grew up in Virginia, you said, right?
That's right, yeah.
Any siblings?
Yeah, so I have one younger brother and two older stepsisters.
Okay. How are you guys very close?
Me and my little brother are very close. I'm close with my stepsisters too, but not as much as my little brother.
How big of a difference in age between you and your brother?
Year and a half.
Year and a half?
Yeah.
And you're 21, right?
That's right.
So he's like 19.
Yep.
Cool. What was growing up like for you guys?
Wow. I mean, there's your 3 hours right there. No, it was interesting. I had two parents that worked real hard to make sure me and my brother had good things and had the things we needed as kids. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is a college town. I've heard it described by someone who's spent more time in Austin than me as like Austin 40 years ago. So it's much, much smaller than Austin, but it's a college town. It's, music, food. It's got that sort of vibe going on. It was largely a pretty good place to grow up. Me and my brother both played a lot of baseball, and there was good baseball to be played around there for the most part. Not at my high school. We were pretty bad. But, yeah.
But that's like my college team. I just flew home a couple days ago, and I asked the people sitting across from me, it's like, oh, why are you guys going to Sacramento? They told me we're going to see the Hornets, which is this team at Sacramento State University. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're flying. You're getting on a plane and spending time and money to go see the Sacramento Hornets play. Mm-hmm. They're like, yeah, we're huge fans. We go back every year for at least a few games. I was like, hey, if that's what you enjoy spending your time and money on,
yeah, man, go whatever works, right? Whatever makes you happy.
But it just was like, really, that's okay.
Yeah. Hey, man. People are strange.
Me being one of them.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, no doubt.
Why did your parents choose baseball for you guys, or did you choose to play that sport?
No, so I actually consider myself very fortunate that it was our choice 100%. It was my choice. I think when you play sports growing up, I know this is true in baseball, and I imagine that it's true across all sports. You grow up around a lot of kids, and you play baseball with a whole lot of kids whose parents, or basically their fathers, are sort of like living through them in a lot of ways, and they like want them to play baseball, and they want them to be really good, and they want to get them all the coaching so they can go to a good college and play baseball. And I didn't go pro, but my son's going to, and so I grew up and I played with a lot of really, really good ball players who ended up just hating baseball by the time they were graduated with high school or even sooner, because they had this immense pressure around the game put on them by their parents. And, you know, for me, it was my thing. I loved the game. I loved to play. My parents were not pressuring me to do it in any way. They were very supportive of me playing and wanted to help me out, but I did it because I loved to do it. And so when you're doing it because you love it and not because you feel this immense pressure to do it or to love it, I think you're able to sustain that for much, much longer.
If I could have had like one thing different about where I was born, I do think it would have been sick to be a hockey player.
Oh, I agree with you completely.
So they're so badass.
Yeah.
I love those guys.
When I was like, gosh, I don't even know, maybe 12 or 13 or something, I went to like a hockey team tryout. There was a local ice rink, and I went to the tryout, and I couldn't even fucking skate. Like, can I curse on this podcast?
Oh, yeah. All you want.
I couldn't even fucking skate, and I went to this hockey tryout because, God knows, I don't know what I was thinking. I thought it'd be fun. Maybe my parents thought it'd be fun. I really don't remember. But I remember just being a wreck out there. Like, I had the buckets. And you know, the other kids could skate. You know, maybe they weren't great hockey players. We were young, but I went to the hockey tryout, and I was just a disaster out there the whole time. And, you know, of course I didn't make the team. And I remember bringing it up to my mom a couple years later, like, what was I thinking? Why was I trying out for a hockey team? And of course they cut me, and she said something like no, they weren't doing cuts. It wasn't even a tryout. Like, we were just out there having fun. And I was like, Mom, come on. I went out to a hockey tryout and I couldn't skate. I got cut. Like, that's what happened.
Those guys, it's crazy how for them, it's second nature. You know, I don't even think they're thinking about it.
No.
They can't be thinking about it. They have too many other things going on that, it's not a court, the rink.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
rink.
On the rink. But like as an attendee, I can't even keep my eye on the puck sometimes, and I'm not even doing anything. I'm just sitting there watching.
Hockey is so fast paced. I think it's one of the most fun sports to watch out there. Like, I like watching fighting and hockey and baseball, and hockey is like, it's so fast paced. It's just constantly moving, and you're right. I mean, half the time you're like, where's the puck? How do these guys know what they're doing?
Yeah. It's funny. Someone told me recently, I was like, you should go to a Texas Stars game. That's the local team here in Austin. And she was like, no, hockey's too boring. I prefer baseball. And I'm like, I get that there are baseball fans. Like,
I'm an avid baseball fan, but that's a terrible take.
Logically, it didn't make sense to me.
No.
I was like, hockey is boring. And I'm not a sports guy. I don't watch any football, baseball, soccer, UFC, nothing. But I showed up in Austin, and I saw that there was a team here, $20 to get in, and I figured, fuck it.
Oh, yeah.
Got a buddy. We went. Even the night of, he was like, it was a Friday night. We both work Monday through Friday jobs. And he was like, I'm pretty tired. Tickets were only $20. You want to skip this thing? I was like, sort of, but let's just go and see what happens.
Yeah.
We both walked out of there with jerseys on our back, and the biggest smile is on our face.
Awesome.
And no voice because we had been chirping at the refs so loud the entire time. Yeah,
man. My dad used to have a buddy who played hockey. I don't know if it probably wasn't beer league. I think it was a little bit higher level than that. It was fun to watch, man. We went to a few games, and like, they're out there just having fun, and they would fight. And then, me and my brother one time did go to like a just straight up beer league hockey game. Like, we were walking around our hometown, and we walked past the ice rink, and there was hockey going on in there. We're like, fuck it. We'll go inside. We'll see what's going on. And it's like, clearly, just regular grown men who like to play hockey, and we're out there, and it was hilarious, man, because there was one dude who like really was being aggressive. He was slashing people. He was trying to throw fists. And the referee knows him by first name. And the referee's like, I forget his name, but he's like, you call him Bill. He's like, Bill, come on. Like, Bill, you got, like, let's just play hockey. We can't be doing this. And Bill's like, it's part of the game, and we're the only two people watching this game. Like, no, it's just for fun. Nobody's coming to spectate. And Bill's trying to throw fists. Everyone else is trying to play hockey. It was fun.
We went to one of the finale games for the last season back in May, and you could tell that definitely, it felt different in the room. First off, it was a full house, whereas the games prior, there are some empty seats usually. So you have a full house, which is one thing. But then you could tell, like, being 3 games away from the end of the season, the stakes are high. And I don't know if maybe they had a specific a rivalry with this team, but at one point, one of the guys on the other team took his stick and just swiped the leg out of one of the Stars players. So then one of the Stars who saw that skates over and just uppercuts this guy. His helmet goes flying off. His nose is bleeding. Ref ends up kicking that guy out because he was the one that initiated it in the first place. And dude, when the crowd saw that the opponent got kicked out and nothing happened to the Stars player, that building just went wild.
That's awesome.
It was so. Make sure you go to like minimum 2 games this season.
I would love to. I really want to catch an Austin FC game too, and I'm not a big soccer person, but I think it'd be fun to go watch.
Do you know what the supporter section is?
No.
Go to the supporter section.
Supporter section.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's the section where there are seats technically, but they've like screw-drive them into the cement, so it forces everyone to be standing. And it's the section where they have like the trumpets and they're throwing their beer up in the air and they're chanting the entire game, and it's just fuel. It's
That's
energy.
Awesome. Sounds like a student section.
It's a student section. Yes. So grew up, brother, baseball, and then when you got to college, was it in college that you did boxing for a little bit?
Yeah, that's right. I did WVU club boxing for, I guess 2 years, and I started boxing during COVID, so the school club was shut down. I was going to a gym off campus, and, it was kind of hush-hush, I guess. I don't think really, and I did that for, I guess close to a year before the club team started playing again, and yeah.
How'd you decide on boxing? Boxing or am I saying that wrong?
Boxing, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
it was boxing. How'd you decide on boxing for a little bit?
I'm not entirely certain how that decision came about. I know I was having a rough go of it. I think everyone was. It was COVID. It sucked. It was like no one was having fun. Everyone was sort of somewhat miserable, I think. And I'd been watching a little boxing. I'd always watched a little boxing and sort of, was aware of it. And I guess like one day I was like, I want to do that. I'm going to do it. Like I think I spent a lot of time during COVID just angry, generally speaking. And I think I watched boxing and thought, like, that looks like fun, and it looks like a way where I could sort of not be angry anymore because I could get some of that out and do it in a productive way and learn a skill that I think would be pretty cool to have. And so I, spent a couple weeks thinking about it, and then I said, fuck it, and I looked up boxing gyms in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I found one called Mountaineer Boxing Academy. Had a phenomenal coach, a really great group of guys around me, guys and gals, and I had a blast. I really, really did.
So this might be a stupid question, but maybe it isn't. What were you angry about?
I was angry about all sorts of things. I was angry about a breakup I'd been through recently. I was angry about, the fact that I was, I guess, 19 years old and the whole world was like just ground to a halt, it seemed like. And that I was in Morgantown, West Virginia with some of my good friends where, the whole thing felt a little less real. And then, I would talk to my parents and it was so real for them and so life or death. Like, you don't want to go outside. If you do, you want to wear a mask. Like, really like apocalyptic, scary type message. And so I had all this guilt about the way that I was acting in Morgantown around my friends. And, we were still drinking and we had, a group of people. It was a small group that we were going out with and not going out to bars. We'd go to each other's houses and hang out. And this is not to beat a dead horse because I think it's been talked about a lot and thankfully we're removed. But I think at the time, no one was really talking about just how difficult it was for young people and people, in high school and college and just young people in general to exist in that time when, when you're grown and you have a family, it's a little different. You stay in with your family and it's not the end of the world. But when you're young and you have a group of friends and you're not living with your family anymore, it's really not a lot of fun to be told you can't go see your friends and you can't, go to any social gatherings. And if you do, you need to wear a mask and get tested and all this stuff. And so, that's in no way to undermine how serious this thing was. It's just to say that it was really difficult. It wasn't a lot of fun.
So did the boxing help?
The boxing helped a ton. It really did.
Yeah.
And it helped a ton for a couple of reasons. And one was, just moving your body really helps you feel better generally. And so for me, it was like this incredible physical ordeal. It was hard, man. I went for 2 hours a day, 4 days a week. I was at the boxing gym and I was training hard. And I sort of went in and we had a competition team at the gym, and then the gym was also open for, you can come take a class, or you can, there are different levels of membership and all this stuff. And so I came in and I was taking the beginner classes, which are you're learning your basic 6 or 7 punches, you're learning very basic footwork, you're hitting a bag, you're doing a little bit of fitness cardio in there as well. And I was, like I said, I sort of felt like I had something to get off my chest. So I was going and I was working really hard during those 1 hour classes. And there was a group of people that, some were also working really hard and some were like, I just want to learn how to punch. And I was going in there and I really, cared about it. I wanted to do well. I wanted to learn. I wanted to get it right. And so within a couple weeks, the coach was like, hey, if you want to come practice with the competition team, you can. It's going to be a big step up. They are doing contact training and a lot of different stuff where it's a big learning curve from hitting a bag to standing across from someone. And even when you're not actually sparring, but just 3-punch drill or just trading punches, even when it's coming, it's a big step up. And I forget what the question was.
Did you get did it help you get the anger out?
Yes.
Yeah.
It absolutely did. And I think, so the physical exercise, like I said, was a part of it. It's very grueling. I was in the best shape of my life for a long time boxing. I felt great physically. And, I got to spar with folks after a little while. My good friend Max, who was my first sparring partner, kicked my ass a couple times, and you would really think that would make you more angry, but somehow it doesn't.
No.
It feels great, and there's this, it's a little hard to describe, but I think there's this incredible respect and meaning in, you go in there and you fight for 3-4 rounds, whatever it is, and then at the end of it, you're better friends than you were before. And you're like, hey, man, that was awesome. That was so much fun. Let's do it again next week. And, something about that just really did make me feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one of my, I don't know if saying favorite memories is the right word, but a memory that made me happy was when the shutdown first started. This isn't you like it?
Oh, that's really good.
That's pretty damn good, isn't it?
Really good. Yeah, shout out to the guy at Wine and Spirits?
Total Wine and More.
Total Wine and More.
And what's the Bank Street?
Bank Street Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, aged 5 years. This is not sponsored. I'm just saying it.
It's fine. Yeah, no sponsors yet. Everything we talk about is just because we enjoy it. So
even better.
Yeah.
Nobody's paying us to say this. It's just true.
So Danny Thornburg, go get yourself. He's one. I don't know if I've have how many people have listened to every single episode, but I do know there's one guy named Danny Thornburg here who's listened to every single episode, watched every single social media clip. He is by far this podcast's biggest fan. I hope there's others like that out there, and maybe they're just afraid to send a message and be like, I'm your biggest fan. But if you are out there, send me a message because it fucking makes my day. It lights a fire under my ass. Yeah,
that's awesome. Hey, Danny, how's it going?
He's doing great. I know he's doing great. I talked to him today, actually. He's with his kids and his wife. So, what was I going to say? Oh, one of my, in early shutdown, this is late April, May of 2020, there is this trail that I would go on probably once a week, and I'd just put in one earphone, and I'd listen to a podcast, and I'd walk this trail for an hour or so, and I was typically the only person out there. If I passed another human being, it was pretty rare. Fast forward to the shutdown, this trail filled up, and everyone on the trail was very happy. And it was, dude, it sounds weird to say, but to see families, couples, teenagers, like everybody was on this trail just living life, no masks, like just happy as could be. And that just like, I think that got me through like the first 2 or 3 months. Was just it went from being once a week to I think I was out there almost every night because I was unemployed, and I would continue just wearing one headphone so I knew what was going on around me. I'd greet people as I'd walk by them. I had conversations with people, and it was just dude, it's fucking great.
You know, it's really actually cool to hear you say that, and the reason is because, you know, I knew a lot of people who were really into hiking and outdoor stuff pre-pandemic who were really like peeved at the fact that everyone else sort of discovered this stuff during the pandemic, right? Like,
that's too bad.
The rest of the world sort of started coming outside, and some people were like, hey, what the fuck, man? We've known about this, and, you know, it's the gatekeeping thing, and so I think you're right. You know, maybe if there was a good thing that came out of all this, it really was that I think a lot of people discovered the outdoors and just how cool it can be to get outside and just go for a walk.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with Max even though you're not boxing at that particular gym anymore?
So Max was also a WVU student, and so we kept in touch all throughout school. I actually haven't talked to him in a little while. I think he's working in Chicago. He's doing some sort of a cybersecurity gig. But I really should reach out to the guy. It's been too long.
It's good to stay in touch. I know I have a couple friends that I have in my calendar, and I call them on their birthdays normally. Mm-hmm. And even though we only talk once a year, let me rephrase that. We usually hang out once to twice a year. But people would love those phone calls, and I think part of the reason is because people don't get phone calls anymore. Like my sister, she writes me letters, and I love getting those in the mail and just reading. It doesn't even matter what they write. I love getting them. So it's that old school shit. So yeah, if you value the friendship and plan on seeing them again one day, you should definitely give them a call. Yeah,
man, that's a great point, and I think you're totally right about phone calls and letters and stuff like that. I love the phone call. I'm a big, like, if I can call instead of texting and it's like even somewhat reasonable, I'm going to call because, you know, it's just like a little extra human contact is good. It makes things easier. You can get, I mean, what would take like 3 hours over a text exchange can be done in, 3 seconds on the phone.
Yeah. Totally. I just had a call with my buddy Travis Marks last night. He's in Maui right now. He got stationed out there partly because of the fires, and he's in the Coast Guard. And yeah, man, it was just like the perfect way to end the week was just to jump on the phone and laugh with them about nothing really, for 45 minutes. So call awesome. Your friends. It's important.
Absolutely.
So why did the boxing end? Was it because you moved out of the area, or was it another reason?
So it was a couple things, and I actually, this is something that's somewhat difficult to talk about, and a lot of people don't talk about this a whole lot, but there are the people that are really into combat sports, and the people who, like, this is what they do. It's what they want to do. It's what they love. It's very, very difficult to explain to someone that that's not what that combat sport is for you. And so I think there's this huge like expectation and stigma almost around, like, if you go into something like that and then you stop, it's because you're a pussy. It's because you couldn't handle it. You didn't like it anymore. You weren't cut out for that. And I want to say a couple things. And the first thing is that in the way that these other people I boxed with were cut out for it, they're 100% right. I wasn't. Right? There were people there, like my good friend Harley White. That guy is a fucking animal. And Harley, if you ever listen to this, like, you fucking get him. Knock people out. Like, I love you, man, and you do your thing. It's fucking awesome. And that wasn't me, right? I loved to box. I loved the competition aspect of it. But for me, it was never like I was never... So the thing that I tried to explain to folks at the time, and which I think I really did a poor job of explaining, and I came off as a real asshole, and it was my fault, is just that I was never going to make a living with my fists. It wasn't going to happen. I loved to box. I really enjoyed it. I was never going to make a living with my fists. I do have this really cool opportunity to make a living with my head, and boxing is not good for that, right? You get hit in the head a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so, I think around the time I started boxing actually is around the time that I really decided that law school was what I wanted to do and knew that it was what I wanted to do. So it was always in the background. Like, if I get hit too many times, and head injuries are scary in a lot of ways because we just don't know that much about them still. And so you get hit in the head and you feel a little off for a couple weeks, man. It's not like if you break a limb or if you get cut, because there it's like, okay, this hurts and I understand why, and I also can sort of understand how the body heals that. When you feel off and your emotions start getting weird and you feel a little slower, that shit's scary. It's not fun. So the boxing stopped for me, one, because, I realized that as much as I loved it, it wasn't ultimately my path in life. It wasn't the thing for me that was going to make me happy and fulfill me as a career. And because I got hit in the head a lot of times, and there comes a point where you can't keep getting hit in the head without consequences to that. And I, probably a little bit of brain development, right? Like, I'm young, still growing up, and probably part of that is like actually coming to the conclusion that this is a bad idea and I'm hurting my long-term chances of doing what I want to do. And like I said, there is that pressure of like, that's very, very difficult to explain to someone who is a fighter and who's a boxer. And my coach and teammates who I had so much respect for and who, I looked up to in a lot of ways and really enjoyed being around, it was really, really difficult for me to move away from that and to try to explain to them why, because I respected them so much, and to them, this was everything. And I think if you want to be a good fighter, it has to be everything, right? There can't be something else in the background. There can't be like, it's not a backup plan. It's everything. That's what you want to do, and it has to be your life. And so I was really fortunate to be around some people who were like that, who it meant that much to, and it was so cool, and I looked up to them a whole lot, and it was difficult to step away from for that reason.
And so you felt like you didn't articulate it very well, and they didn't really understand why you left. And
I didn't articulate it well, man. And at the time, I think that like stress of I don't want to let these people down. I don't want to come off like I'm better than anyone, right? Like, I think there's this. Gosh, I mean, the way that I explained it to you, the way that I think about it is like, I've got the chance to make a living with my head, right? And I think that can come off in a lot of ways as like, I'm too smart to be doing shit like this, which is not how I felt at all, right? Like, I loved to box. I really enjoyed it. And smart boxers are really good boxers, right? You have to be smart to be a good fighter. You have to be smart in a whole lot of ways. So I really struggled to put into words that I think what I said at the time was more along the lines of, I'm going to make money with my head and not my hands, and so I can't keep doing this for that reason. And what I meant to say and what I should have said is that I think that my path is leading me somewhere else, and this place where my path is leading me is somewhere where I really need to be careful about protecting my brain in the same way that, a professional athlete signs contracts where they're not going to go out water skiing or crazy shit where they could get hurt because their body and their physical abilities make them money and are very valuable to them. And for me, that was, just a little slightly different, where I think that my path to doing something important in this world is going to require me to do a whole lot of thinking. And frankly, I was really scared of losing that ability by getting hit in the head too many times.
It's a healthy fear. If it makes you feel better, you did not come off as an asshole at all when you gave me the explanation just now. But
well, thank you.
Maybe as you've grown and matured, you've articulated it better.
Yeah,
but,
a couple years of practice.
Yeah. But I do find it fascinating. Like, there's I think he would be okay with this term, a bodybuilder that goes to my gym who's won competitions and gets hired to go to shoots. And I do think it's really fascinating. Anyone whose profession relies on their body, whether that's a fighter, a professional skier, a professional gymnast, because like in this dude's case, he's married. He has 3 kids. The most recent one was born this year. So pretty sure it's a boy, is under 9 months old. And like, imagine if he got in a car accident today. You know, like what I've always wondered, like, what's the fallback? You know, like that's terrifying to me. And I asked him to come on the show once because that was one of the questions. I would phrase it differently, but just like, I am curious for any athlete, even going back to like hockey players, you know, like if you're a pro hockey player and you break a leg and the doctor says like, even if he says that doctor says you can go back on the ice, but you have to sit out for an entire season, do you just go a year unpaid? Do you got to go get a job at Taco Bell during that year? So like, it's like any job that relies on something physical, it scares the shit out of me, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, man, in a lot of ways. And yeah, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I guess I think it makes a lot of sense for me to frame my decision to stop boxing competitively in that sense of like, it's not a physical profession, but it's an intellectual profession, and it requires a whole lot of thinking, and it requires you to be sharp on your feet, a lot of times sharper than the other guy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think you're right that just like getting older and maturing sort of led me to the conclusion that I had to set my priorities in order and really realize and recognize what the priorities were and the ways in which the other things I was doing were harming that first priority. And one more thing, just because you've given me a platform here.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Probably no one I ever boxed with will ever listen to this, but...
Well, I'm going to tell them all.
You should. You really should.
I'm gonna look up the gym and
I hope you will. And the one other thing that I want to say, just in the hopes that, really Harley White, if you ever listen to this, please listen to this next part. The hardest thing about quitting boxing was for me, that I loved that group of people. It was so much fun. You make such close, incredible friends when you're doing something that's so difficult like that, right? Where you go into that gym for 2 hours a day and you just put yourself through it, and you're doing it with people who are on the same page and who want to work hard and who want to get better with you, and they want to help you get better. They want you to help them get better. When I stopped boxing, I didn't feel like I had any way to stay connected with those people in a meaningful way. Boxing was the way that we knew each other. For a lot of these people, as I said, it was a huge, huge part of their life and how they spent a lot of their free time. And again, I think that this is probably on me. I should have reached out and done a better job of connecting outside of boxing and explaining myself. But the explaining myself was so difficult, and the realization that I wasn't going to be boxing anymore was so difficult that I really just ended up losing contact with a lot of these people that had meant so much to me, and it was so difficult, and I didn't have the words or the tools to explain how to do that, and I didn't know how to connect with these people outside of the sport, and it made it very difficult. And so, the reason I call out Harley there is Harley used to, tell me whenever I'd see him after I had stopped going to the gym, even when I was doing WVU club boxing, he'd be like, man, come by the gym sometime. Like, we'd love to see you. We miss you, all this stuff. And I was like, man, I fucking love you guys too, and I miss you too, but I don't want to come by the gym anymore, and that's just not for me anymore. And it was very difficult to leave the people behind in addition to leaving the competitive nature of the sport behind.
Do you feel at peace with your decision, or does it seems like it's still weighing on you a little bit?
It does still weigh on me a little bit, and I think it weighs on me for 2 reasons. And one is that I was in the best shape of my life, and I felt great all the time, and I don't feel that good anymore physically, right? Like there was a summer there where I was painting houses every day and I was boxing every night. And at the end of that summer, I had a fight, and so I was working my ass off. I would wake up in the morning and run, and then I would go and paint all day outside. We did exteriors only because we were not painters. Nobody would trust us to paint the inside of their houses. And then I would go to the boxing gym for 2 hours, sometimes a little bit longer every night. And like the week of the fight and after the fight was like the best I ever felt physically. I just felt incredible. I felt like I could do anything in the world. And it was awesome. So I miss that a lot. And the other aspect of it is like, you know, I talk about this, or I talked briefly about this perception that if you quit doing this stuff, it's because you're soft. It's because you can't handle it. And I have trouble fighting that off of myself, right? Like you know, I know that that's not the reason I quit doing it. I know that I would still love to do that stuff, but it does sort of weigh on you, and it weighs on you, this perception that like, well, did I quit on myself there? Did I quit doing that for a reason other than the reason I'm telling myself? And it can be hard to square. You know, I think maybe it's tied up in our concepts of masculinity and what it means to be a man. And I think fighting in a lot of ways is, right? And I think it's why it's a male-dominated sport for the most part. But, yeah, so difficult for those two reasons.
Do you still think that about yourself? Do you think, is there moments where you're like, man, am I a pussy?
There are moments. Yeah, no doubt.
Isn't that funny how we do that to ourselves? Maybe funny's the wrong word. But like,
but I know what you mean, and you know, the part that's maybe even funnier is that it's even hard to sit here with you and say that, right? And to say like, yes, I feel that way sometimes, right? And to talk about this at all is sort of like there's an enormous stigma around it, and I think, you know, men generally don't talk about this stuff except in ways that are generally really unhealthy, in ways that are just like, I'm not a pussy. Are you a pussy? You know, and it's like you don't ever have the conversation of like, why are we doing this to ourselves, and why are we setting these standards for ourselves? And I like you said, I go back and forth on it, right? Like deep down, I know that the reason that I stopped doing this is because it wasn't the path for me, and I have this opportunity to do something really cool in the world. And I didn't want to throw that away. But the other, like, I also do know, as I said before, that I was not cut from the same cloth as a lot of these guys that I boxed with, right?
Yeah.
And I, like, you know, people ask me, you know, oh, you boxed, like, and then they switch real quickly into the terminology of, oh, so you were a boxer. And I almost try to resist that. Like, I don't want to call myself a boxer because I knew boxers. And I knew fighters, and they were cut from a different cloth. And I, you know, as much as it is, like, difficult to talk about and to say, like, well, I was softer than them, it's true, man. These guys were hardcore. I watched my friend Harley White fight in a heavyweight fight in a Golden Gloves tournament where, man, him and this other guy were just fucking throwing punches. I mean, they were hitting each other hard, and Harley got hit so hard one time you could see his eyes rolling around in his head, and he just kept going forward. And I'm like, man, that's fucking awesome, and I don't have that in me. That's not me. When I got hit really hard, I went on defense. I started trying to dodge punches and trying to cover up and trying to recover for a second so that I could go back to fighting. And you know, they're basically, as a lot of people like to say, there's levels to this shit, and there are people who really are I mean, they're just different, right? When they get hit, it's like exciting, and for me that was true to an extent, right? Like I would get hit in sparring, and when Max would hit me, and when other guys would hit me that I knew that I could compete with, it's exciting, right? You get hit by someone who you know you can compete with, and there's this. It's like, okay, motherfucker, let's go. Let's go. This is fun. Let's do it. And then sometimes you go up against someone who's just better than you are. And when they hit you, when they hit me, I didn't feel that way anymore. I didn't feel like, okay, let's go. I felt like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. I'm in trouble right now. You know, like I'm in danger. This is not fun anymore. And I knew people that weren't like that, and that's why I sort of say I shy away from the term, like when people say, oh, you were a boxer? Well, no, I boxed for a couple years, and I loved it, and it was so much fun, but I know boxers, and it's a different level. It's a different thing, and I almost feel disrespectful calling myself a boxer.
I get that. Do you know of a UFC fighter? I think his name is Bryce Mitchell.
I've heard the name, but I don't know much about him.
Is he a UFC fighter?
He is a UFC fighter.
Okay, so at least I'm saying the name right. I heard him do an interview. It was from a year ago, but it was interesting because he said, I would never hold myself back in a fight, and I didn't enjoy hitting the other person, but I also showed up to win. Until he was like, every now and then he'd be in the middle of that ring and the other fighter under his breath would say something like, you're a little bitch, or like, bring it on, pussy. And he's like, as soon as you insult me, there'd be like a switch in his head where all of a sudden he did want to hurt you, and he did want to. It was no longer even about winning. Yeah. It was just like why are you bringing that in here? Like, why are you calling me a little bitch right now? Like, I'm in here with you. Clearly I'm not a bitch, because if I was, maybe I wouldn't have shown up. I'm butchering what he said, but the first part I know I got accurate about just how that was interesting, about how he's just it was fascinating to me that this is his profession, even though he doesn't like hurting people, yet he does know he wants to win.
So it's so interesting that you bring that up, because you would be amazed, and people who are not around combat sports at all are really amazed to find out that good fighters, are some of the most kind, respectful people you will ever meet, generally speaking. Right? And we get this perception because when we watch really good fighters, you really have to remember that these guys, at the end of the day, they do two things. They fight and they sell fights. And it doesn't sell fights to be like, oh, yeah, I really respect the guy, and I think he's a great fighter, and I'm just looking forward to testing myself against him, right? It sells fights to do the Conor McGregor approach and tell him you kill his whole family if it was a different time, and, all this crazy stuff. But when you're around fighters and people who are really good fighters, you get to see this side of people where it's like, at the end of the day, it's all respect, man. When you're sparring and when you're fighting and when it's not in that like really high stakes level, it's a very respectful environment. There's a lot of like mutual respect between people, and I think most people who fight realizes that it takes a special breed of person to even go into that ring in the first place, or go into that octagon in the first place and step in there and put yourself on the line like that. And so, generally speaking, there's this massive mutual respect and really kind people that I think people who are not around it, they get that wrong, right? You think that it's like this massively testosterone-fueled anger fest full of assholes who just want to hurt people, and it's really not the case. And there's a lot of people who are so respectful and so kind outside of the sport and within the sport who want to help other people get better, and they want to get better themselves, and for them it's about the competition. It's not, fuck you, man, you want to fight me. Like, that doesn't come into it. And I think more often than not, the people who think that way have no experience whatsoever fighting. It's funny, I listened to one of your earlier episodes with a guy named Jack something.
Shirley.
Yes.
Jack or Jack. I think are you about to bring up the guy that I was introduced to at the gym?
Maybe, I don't know. So I listened to an episode where, I was sort of skipping through because, like you say, I'm busy, and I was just listening through, and he said something along the lines of, I always regretted not getting into a fight.
Yeah.
And first of all, I get it completely, right? And he said, like, I was 20 years old at this time when I was walking around just hoping I could fuck somebody up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get that, man. And I think that, I think it's almost a rite of passage where a lot of us go around at a young age feeling this way. Like, I would just love to, just once. I'd like to be in the right, of course. You're not like, I just want to go beat people up. It's right. Like, if somebody and I think he said the same thing. He's like, if somebody was out of line, I'd love to drop him. Right? And I think that's, it's very relatable. And I think that for one thing, there's a difference between that feeling and the people who go out looking to get in fights, mm-hmm. right? It's very different. But there are people, and I met a lot of people like this and knew a lot of people like this in Morgantown, West Virginia, who go out to bars and they're like, I want to get in a fight. I just want to fuck somebody up. And I think a lot of that comes from insecurity. And so people who really fight and who really know how to fight, like, I don't go to a bar thinking, like, I need to fight someone, because I know that I can fight. And I know that if it comes down to it and somebody attacks me, I'm going to be able to hold my own. And I think that that's that attitude pervades the sport or really all combat sports in a way that actually leads to, like, generally speaking, people who are more well-adjusted in regular life of being able to, like, no, I don't want to fucking fight someone for no reason, right? And your other guest said the same thing. Like, you grow up a little and you're like, oh, that's stupid. Like, why did I want to do that? And it's true. And I think that, like, you know, involving yourself in some sort of combat sport actually helps you learn that really quick. Like, the going out and just looking for a fight it's stupid. If you want to fight someone, go join a boxing gym. Go join a jiu-jitsu gym. Go do it the right way and fight someone who knows how to fight. But, like, going out and you're like, oh, I bet you I could kick his ass. It's like, well, why, right? It's not important. And as soon as you get that experience of involving yourself with people who really can fight and involving yourself with, like, the actual technique of fighting and learning to do it well, I think that desire to prove something to yourself and others really fades into the background, because you don't feel the need to prove it, basically.
Yeah. I don't know if you got this part of his episode, but very close to that segment, he said something to the effect of, I thought I'd be really good at fighting, and then I got in my first fight and found out.
Yes.
Dude, I was dying when he said that. Like, the reality, because I did even less than you did. I did 6 months of, there's a guy in my gym, and I was in this weird phase of life, and I knew he was a boxer, and I was like, listen, man, I am sick of being a pussy. Can you teach me how to fight? And he's like, sure, let's meet back here at like 9:30 p.m. and we'll meet in the group exercise room that they usually use for like yoga and Zumba and whatnot. And I trained with him for like 6 months, and I am not cut from the cloth of people who were made for it. You know, I just got too many. One of the things was, I got a black eye once, and I had like 2 days later or 3 days later, when it really is starting to look pretty gnarly, I had a presentation in front of, I was a general manager of a health club, and I had a presentation to the president and the 2 vice presidents and a few other people. And I remember just walking into that thing thinking, like, fuck, like, I really wish I didn't have a black eye right now. Like, and there's a part of me, like, looking back on it where I'm like, so I have a black eye, like, there's a justified reason for it, and even though there's a justified reason for it, it's none of their business. Maybe my home got invaded, maybe, like, who the fuck knows why, like, why am I self-conscious about this? But then there is that other side of me where I did care what people think, and I did want to make this, like, presentation about the financial health of my health club while not looking very healthy myself, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like you probably wouldn't want to show up to a courtroom or to even a classroom with a group of your peers with a black eye, or even just like feeling hungover when you actually didn't drink at all. You just got the shit beat out of you in a match the prior Friday, and it's still affecting you that coming Monday. But I brought all of this up to say that Jack's comment was very funny about just that realization of, until you really get in one, you don't know what's going to happen. And then the last thing I'll wrap up with is just to say, I do wonder, like, if you and me were at the bar with some of our friends and some people started, like, bullying them and a fight did break out, I wonder, like, how much my adrenaline would just kick in to a point where all of a sudden when you're defending someone you love, if it, like, makes you that much more not aggressive but tactical. Do you get what I'm getting at a little bit?
I do, and I have a couple of thoughts about this. The first thought, and I'm going to sound like a real tool here, I'll just let you know.
I'm ready for it.
I really
Let's
am.
go.
Sorry, guys.
Let's go.
Maybe sound even more like Matt Rife for
Let's
a second.
Go.
There is a very real phenomenon that when you know how to fight and you get put in a situation where somebody else is escalating and someone else is acting like they're looking for a fight, generally speaking, if that person doesn't know how to fight and they look you in your eyes, they don't want to fight anymore. So I've had situations where, you know, I was at a house party in Morgantown and some guy came up, and it was, you know, my close friend, it was my fraternity's house. And so we had a guy come up and basically he was out of line in a bunch of ways. He was causing a scene, and a couple of guys were like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, but you got to go." You know, and it was very respectful. Everyone was like, "You just have to leave." And, you know, he of course was very drunk and wanted to make a scene about it, and fuck you guys, I'm not going anywhere. You know, the whole thing everyone's seen. And so someone came and got me, and they were like, "Can you get rid of this guy?" Because they knew that I was boxing at the time. And I was like, sure, no problem. You know, and I went up to the guy and I was like, hey man, like nobody wants a problem. We just need you to leave, right? You're not welcome here anymore, whatever. You try to keep it as respectful as possible. And he said something along the lines of like, all right, like, you know, you got a problem, we can go box it out. And I mean, basically, like I had also had a fair amount to drink, but the way I remember it is my eyes lit up and I'm like, okay. Right? Like, I get excited about this sort of thing because it's like just some asshole and he's basically giving me an excuse to kick his ass when I know I can. He does no fight training. And generally speaking, someone looks in your eyes right then and they realize that, oh, this person actually would enjoy this. And that's a terrifying realization. And that's true even for me, like and of course I'm not going out trying to get in fights, but like when I was sparring with people, there are guys you line up against and they're like my friend Harley, man. This dude was a heavyweight, but we used to all spar together. Not really spar, but we'd do 3-punch drills and shit. And if any time that I would like actually fake him out and land a good clean punch on the guy, like I'd land like a real solid clean left hook and this fucking guy would just start grinning. And I was like, oh fuck, man. And like
Harley.
Yes, and no, that's some scary shit. It really is. Like when you recognize in your head that the person you're trying to fight or fighting loves it and they eat it up and they're way more ready to actually fight than you are, it's a scary moment. And most people, and so all this to say in response to your question, like you'll go out with people and you're, you know, around your friends and someone starts, you know, trying to start shit. Like I've been in this situation a couple times and generally like you stand up and you stand in front of them. You're like, hey, like nobody here wants to have a problem, but you have to calm down. And like, this is not why we're out tonight. Like just go enjoy your drink and have fun. And generally speaking, those people realize very quickly that they've bitten off a little bit more than they can chew and they wanted to talk and they wanted to scare someone off. But when they get someone who's just willing to stand up in front of them and say, these are my friends and you're out of line and you're not going to fuck with my friends tonight. Most of the time, you know, they're going to mouth off a lot more and try to save their ego a little bit, but they're going to go sit down and enjoy their night or, you know, stew over what just happened, but They're going to leave you alone.
There is I would just preface this by saying this story is going to show how much of a fighter I am not. But it's one of my favorite stories, and I don't think I've told it on any episode yet. But when I first moved out of my parents' place, me and my buddy Eli were looking for somewhere to live together, and we were shopping different apartment complexes, and there's this one apartment complex we go to where, like, if this is the complex, they had this one what they called a cottage that was sort of separated from the rest of the complex by a bunch of grass and trees. And so they walk us out to the cottage and they show it to us. It's very decently priced and it's private, it's quiet. We're like, oh, cool, we can be loud here. And so we move into this cottage. So we throw a little house party and, you know, people are there and I smell cigarette smoke. And I look over and there's this guy smoking a cigarette in the middle of the family room. So I go up to him and I don't know him. So I'm like, it must be one of Eli's friends. And I'm like, hey man, would you mind like going on the porch or out like at the front door? You get similar to your story, like very respectful kind, like don't give a fuck if you smoke, just don't do it in the family room.
Exactly.
And he's like, who the fuck are you? And at that point, it's like, does it even matter who the fuck I am? Like, this is just like common sense, in my opinion. And I'm like, well, I'm Eli's roommate. I'm guessing he invited you. And he's like, if you don't want me to smoke in here, Eli can come tell me himself. I'm like, fuck, okay, so I'll just go get Eli. So I'm looking around. So I go to Eli's room, and the door's locked. I put my ear up to it, and of course, he's like fucking someone in there. Like, so I bang on the door anyway. He's like, I don't care. I'm like, Eli, get out here. He's like, fuck off. And I'm like, no, get out here. He's like, give me 7 minutes. I'm like, well, I don't have a 7 minutes. Cigarette smoker will be confident. He'll be done. He has the exact time down. I just need exactly 7 minutes.
So I need 7 minutes and 29 seconds. I'll be out there.
And I'll be out there like seconds too. Holy cow, Eli! Like this is damn. So I go back out there and I'm like, listen, man, Eli's preoccupied, but I'd really appreciate it if you would please smoke on the porch. And he looked at me and he's like, and I told you can go fuck yourself. Okay, so me, also being several drinks in, decides the only solution to this is I I turn around, I leave the family room, I go slightly down the hallway, I turn around, I run as quickly as I can, jump into the air, swing my head at his head, and headbutt the shit out of his nose.
The image of that happening is phenomenal. That's fucking awesome.
Fucking head swing. Before Tom Brady, I was the GOAT motherfucker. He took my title.
Clearly.
And so his nose is bleeding, and he's crying and runs out of the cottage. I pick his cigarette up from the floor as quickly as possible. I'm like, it's carpeted, so I'm like trying to stomp out the.
Did you say he was crying?
Yeah, he was crying.
That's fucking
with his nose bleeding.
Oh my god.
I pick up his cigarette, go and throw it in the sink, douse it out. But in my head, I think what I subconsciously. I don't know if this thought went through my head, but as I look back on that moment, I think what I was thinking was the first punch needs to be hard, because if he fights back, I know I'll probably lose.
So in your defense, like if you listen to good fighters talk about, like, when you get, like, MMA fighters do interviews all the time about, like, what should you do if you get in a street fight? Hit first and hit hard. And it's just the way to go. It's actually, like, really, that's the way, because the reality is, like, as confident as you are in your own ability, you don't know who the other person is. You just don't. You go out, you don't know who they are. And the other point is, like, and I think maybe the overarching theme of this little mini conversation we've had is some people are just assholes, man. Like this dude with the cigarette, you're asking him respectfully to please go outside, and it's your house, and it's like
cottage.
Cottage. Sorry, my apologies. I might have just misgendered his living situation there.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just saw a chance for a funny moment. I couldn't pass it up.
I'm with you there. Yeah, like, just common decency, man. This should not be escalating to the situation where my friend David here has to headbutt somebody and flying through the air. Like, fucking go outside and smoke your cigarette, you piece of shit.
Just so you guys know, because it probably didn't pick up on the mics, but he just walked. He was chuckling his entire walk down to the bathroom, and that's great. You want a fresh cube, or would you prefer it?
I actually would like a fresh cube. Yeah, thank you. I really do like this whiskey, man. This is good stuff. I'm gonna have to start trusting the fellas at the liquor store a little more.
I mean, this guy was enthusiastic enough about it. I could tell, like, he's drank this. He's not just trying to sell me because of, like, they're overstocked on the side of him. He knew as soon as I said whiskey and he just beelined over to it, I thought that's enough to convince me.
I like it, man. Have you ever had Bullet bourbon?
Yes.
That's one of my favorites. That's kind of my go-to in terms of, like, affordable but good whiskey. It's like you're not going to pay a fortune for it, but it's good. It's consistent. This is a cool spot, man. Like, this neighborhood, this area, it's real nice.
You like it?
I like it a lot. The proximity to the river is very cool, and it's a cool part of Austin. It actually, driving over here, I was in the Uber, and it's like kind of the winding, like, hilly roads. A little taste of home for me. I like that a lot.
It reminds you of Virginia?
Virginia, West Virginia. Like, I love me a mountain road that's a little bit, curvy, winding. Yeah.
So I sort of blindly got this place, and they sent me a video. Like, they already had I'm sure all places during COVID, they took a little video of the outside, and then they took a video of the unit I was going to get, and I did not fly out here to see it. I just sort of trusted what I saw. And me and co-producer Thaddeus drove in at 10 o'clock at night, and so there's not a lot of streetlights around here, so it was like we didn't see the trees, the mountains. We didn't see any of it. So we saw other parts of Austin as we got off the highway, but as far as like the 2 or 3 miles driving in, we saw none of this. So then we got the air mattress out. I moved out here with nothing, so I got the dog, the air mattress, and the bottle of whiskey out of the car, and we slept right here together in the middle of the family room, and woke up the next morning and opened the curtains and walked outside. I was like, dude, we fucking scored. Like, yeah, man. This is beautiful.
Yeah. When I moved to Texas, or when I was I guess, considering moving before I visited. I mean, the image in my head is like desert, Southwest, tumbleweeds. Austin's not really like that. Like, there, you know, it's hot as hell. Don't get me wrong. It's fucking hot in Austin, but it's beautiful, man. Trees, wildlife, like it's great.
This is how hot it is here. I want you to be comfortable. So when I have a guest showing up, especially when you tell me beforehand you're going to be all dressed up, I fucking set the thermometer for 55 because my poor AC just can't keep up. And when you got here, I think it was 71. When we went to piss just now, I saw it was 73. Like, it's just so, it just can't keep up.
No, man, it's unbelievable. It really is.
That's why the whiskey comes in.
Yeah. Where I come from, we get 1 to 2 weeks a year where it's 95 to 100 degrees. And granted, it's more humid where I come from. So that's hot. That's like that 1 or 2 weeks. It's like, man, this sucks. I've been in Austin 2 months now. There's been maybe 8 days where it's been under 100 degrees. Like, maybe 8 days. It gets to 104, 106 every fucking day. Yep. And it's unbelievable. I go to take the trash out and I'm sweating bullets.
Yeah. How do you, it's funny that they made you get all dressed up for this boating event tonight.
They said fucking cocktail attire. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know.
They told us to wear boat wear.
See, I would have loved that. One of the other sections said their theme was tropical. Like one of my friends, she said her section's theme is tropical. And I'm like, that's fucking awesome. I have a Hawaiian shirt I could wear. That would have done the trick. Yeah. Shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, but instead, cocktail attire.
If it makes you feel better.
I'm going to a wedding in a week, and this is what I'm wearing.
Well, hopefully it cools off a little bit between now and
the wedding's in Virginia, so I should be good.
Or I mean, even just for tonight's purposes, hopefully it cools off a little bit.
They told us apparently on the water it cools off a little. I don't know. We'll see.
As someone who was out on the water yesterday with the sun just blazing down, it was funny because everyone would sort of go to the top of the boat for like 5 or 10 minutes to look at the houses and the views and the lake. It is beautiful, but then people would pretty quickly run back to the first floor where it was, you had your air-conditioned room where the bar and the food was, which also, like, that's where the bar and the food was. But, yeah, man, I wish they would have planned the trip, like, in October maybe, just because, like...
I will say I can't wait for, like, the winter months here because UT Law is, like, I want to say 70% in-state students because they take money from the state. They get state funding, so they have to have, like, a certain percentage of in-state students. I can't wait for the winter because everyone's going to be, you know, all bundled up and I'll be like, it's fucking 50 degrees. It's not cold.
Yeah.
I'll really get to show off then. Now it's embarrassing, you know. I wear long pants and I'm like soaking wet. I'm hot.
These were gray, but they just look black because of all the sweat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a fireplace tucked away in the corner, and I fucking can't wait to not turn it on, but dude, I love fires. I don't know why.
Me too.
There's just something about like building a fire, and I don't even care what you're doing. You have people over, you're watching a movie, you're napping, you're reading. Like fires are just fucking great.
I'm with you. I agree.
So yesterday, it's funny because I didn't look at your guest form until yesterday. I don't prepare your questions until about 24 hours beforehand or less. Because I want them to be fresh in my head, so I'm not reading the entire time we're talking. So I saw that yesterday around lunchtime, you put down Greek and Roman history is of interest to you. So then I go on this event with my company last night, which we were just alluding to. They were very kind. They do an annual event for us. And this year they took us out on a boat. We went up and down the river. And one of the conversations that came up with like me and 3 other dudes, I had not heard this before. So this is brand new information to me. I did not bring this up either. One of the other guys did. He was like, what do you think about this thing that's going on right now where if a guy has a girlfriend, she asks him, how many times have you thought about Rome this week? And I don't know if I just live in a fucking hole. Do I live in a hole for not knowing anything about this?
No, so, okay, 2 things. One, I don't have TikTok, and that's where this happens mostly, or Instagram, and I'm sure that happens on there too. So I had heard about it, but it's because I'm in school, right? Like, I go to school with, generally youngish people. Like, and so, people were talking about it, and I heard a group of my friends talking about it the other day. But yeah, how many times a day do you think about the Roman Empire? How often do you think about the Roman Empire? And I actually got asked this question just last night by someone. It's like,
by who?
That's actually a great question, and I'm going to have to plead the fifth on that one.
Okay, fair enough.
Her name's Elena.
You just said you were going to plead the fifth.
Well, I'm pleading the fifth on the by who when you ask, like, what's the relationship? I'm pleading the fifth on that one.
Okay.
Sorry, Elena.
Sorry, Elena, but thank you for that. So
thanks for asking the question,
apparently it's topical. Yeah, so I'm not on. One thing I'm good at is when I have a podcast coach, and when he told me that I had to be on TikTok, I am very good at. I go in, I hit the little plus sign, I post my video, and I'm fucking out of there.
That is very impressive.
I don't have time, and I don't even want to. I don't even want to. It's not me. I'm not a scroller. I have better things to do with my. I just insulted all TikTok users. So I'm not saying you guys. I just don't want to get sucked in.
Get a fucking life.
But so you do know about this. It's a thing. Great. So for you, I know how I would answer this. I still play to this day about 3 times a year. I'll take an evening and I'll play a round of Age of Empires. You know this game?
I don't actually.
It's from like the 90s.
Okay.
So it's I play on my computer. It's old as fuck. Mm-hmm. But it's such a good game. I just played around last night. So the last time I thought about Rome was last night. The time before that would have been when I played Thanksgiving of last year. But I don't.
So you don't think about Rome on a daily basis or even like a regular basis at all?
I don't think so.
Oh, man, here we go. So, as I said, I was asked this question just the other night.
How did you answer it? Can you tell that?
Yeah, so the question, just in its pure, social media trend form, is how often do you think about the Roman Empire? My answer to the question was because I've heard of this trend, it's gone up recently, right? Of course, because you hear about the trend and then that gets you, when you think about the trend, you're thinking about the Roman Empire. That's just how it goes.
Right. If I say think about a purple elephant.
At least every day, though, is the answer pre-trend. At least every day I think about the Roman Empire. I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that this is absurd. It's ridiculous. There's no reason that this should be happening in my mind, but it is. And I would offer a few justifications. The first is, as David so kindly mentioned in my introduction, I studied philosophy in college. And so I read all these ancient Greek philosophers and the Greeks and the Romans, and, that stuff interests me. It's interesting. To give the more fuck you guys, fuck this question, you should be thinking about the Roman Empire more answer. The whole world we live in is shaped by the Roman Empire. And, you could argue this point with me, and I'd be willing to hear many objections, but this is the beginning, the Greeks and then the Romans, the beginning of Western civilization as we know it, and the first form of republican government, the first, all this stuff that goes on in the Roman Empire is fascinating, and it's interesting, and beyond that, beyond just the here's why I think you should think about the Roman Empire, this is the more absurd answer, the answer where you could reasonably think to yourself, all right, this guy's a fucking maniac. But realistically speaking, there's something to the whole glory, conquest, lions in the gladiator cage thing that appeals to me, and I think appeals to other people as well. And so there's something to that. It's the go conquer everyone, and state sanctioned gladiator matches. That sounds fun. I'm down with that.
So. Yeah, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So here's one of the questions I asked the guys last night, and I have 2 or 3 different layers that I want to pose to you. Mm-hmm. So the top layer would be, what's the stadium here in Austin? The football stadium at the college. What's that called?
DKR.
Okay.
Which is Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium.
So let's say there is an announcement that there was going to be a gladiator tournament at DKR, would you go?
I would pay everything that I have in my savings account to go to that.
Is your savings like $5? No,
it's more than that. No, hold on. To be clear, I'm not a rich man. I'm a student.
Same here.
It's not very much.
Right. But you'd pay it all.
I'd pawn stuff.
Well,
too.
even if it was $5, that $5 means a lot to you. So whether it's 5 or 5,000,
I would give anything. Yes, I would be there, and everything.
So the follow-up question, and it's funny because they were like, "Well, give us a dollar amount," and I said 100, and they said yeah, and I said 1,000, and they said yeah, and then the conversation wandered off. But then the follow-up question would be, so you pay everything, you pay your savings account for this ticket, and you show up at DKR, and my answer would also be yes. So maybe I'd be there with you, and maybe Dom and some of the other people.
Dom would be there
in your
Dom
sector.
Would be there.
What do you
Section.
call it? Section. Sorry, your section. So then it starts, and the first kill happens. We see a guy get decapitated. Now, in that situation, there is no way to know what you would actually feel. But if you had to speculate, what do you think you would feel?
That is a phenomenal question, let me just say first. It's very interesting, and I think it gets at like so much more than just me. It's like human nature almost, really. So, to be as realistic and candid as possible, I think the first guy that got decapitated, going into this event, I'm like, fuck yeah, gladiators, man, this is awesome, this is so cool. And then I think the first guy that gets decapitated, I do think there's a moment there where you're like, oh, fuck. Right? Like, because we're not used to this. We don't see this stuff. Most people live, a lot of their lives in America without even seeing a dead body. Like, we're so far removed from death in our society, much less killing. Mm-hmm. But, so I think the first person gets decapitated and you're like, oh man, I paid a lot of money to be here, and is this what I paid for? Like, this is real. That dude's dead. And then I think it depends immensely on the crowd reaction around you. So here's where I would actually distinguish between your scenario and another scenario. If I went back to ancient Rome, like time machine, go back to ancient Rome, go to a gladiator match, the first one I'm having the same reaction. And then everyone around me is like, yeah, get him. And then I think the second one, I'm there. I'm fine. I mean, I'm with them. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is happening. Let's enjoy it. Here today, though, you go to DKR, you see a gladiator match. The second kill, there's people walking out. There's, the third kill, there's people like, oh, this is sick. I can't believe they're allowing this, And so the context does change it, I think, right? Because I mean, mob mentality is a real thing. I think like in the instance where everyone in the stadium is like, fucking kill him, let's go. Like I think this the first time you still are like, oh shit, right? Because as a person living today, we've never seen this. We haven't ever been to an arena to watch people kill each other. So the first time it takes you aback, but then you kind of are able to get into it. Right, and you're like, okay, like, and I think the other thing is, I don't mean to say that. I don't mean to say that like you watch someone die once and then you're like, oh, this is cool. I think I want to be really clear about what I'm saying here, which is when you signed up to go to the gladiator fight, right? You asked me how much are you paying for this, and I'm like, anything, I would go.
Yeah,
that's with the full knowledge of what goes on there, right? So I know what's happening there. I know that this is what's happening. My reaction to the first kill is more physical and emotional than it is mental, right? Because mentally, if I'm going to this, I've squared myself with the idea of what's going on there. I'm okay with what's going on there if I'm going to go. The first time you have this, like, almost visceral reaction where you're like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. Like, but then after that, assuming that you're okay with the general concept and you're okay with what's going on there, I think then you pretty quickly are like, okay, I'm okay with this now, right? Because, I mean, and I think this is a broader a broader scope or topic, which is like squaring your mental attitudes with your emotional and physical reactions to things. Mm-hmm. But I do think that generally speaking, people are able to do this pretty quickly, right? Like you have a mental attitude about something. You have a reasoned, thought out position on something. And then you actually, have an experience with that thing, or you encounter that thing in person, and you have a different physical reaction or an emotional reaction to it. And then you have to square the two, assuming they're different. And I think it happens pretty quickly. So I think, in this case with the gladiator fights, it's like the first kill, you're like, no doubt, you're like, what the fuck? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And then I think if everyone else has that reaction, there's this like unwillingness to go the next step and to say, oh, this is fucking awesome. Let's get it.
So what if it didn't? Like, what if the first kill happens and the whole stadium just sort of falls silent? Do you think that would happen?
Do I think that would happen? Like today, Austin, Texas, DKR,
yeah.
First kill.
I mean, it obviously we're just two guys shooting the shit. We cannot predict.
No, obviously,
what a stadium of
100% speculation.
How many does it fit? What's the number? I just know it's ridiculous.
Gosh, DKR, it's not 100K, but it's probably close. 80, 90, I would guess.
Hey Siri, how many people does the stadium DKR fit? Let's see if she knows. 100,000. Whew. 100,000 people. That's a lot of, if this was a sold out event, that's a lot of opinions and walks of life, and that's going to be a very eclectic mix of human beings. I mean, granted, we all live in Austin, but even Austin, I feel like, is a pretty diverse town because so many people have moved in. Like, I think I've met under 5 people that were born and raised in Austin. I would dare to say under 3, even though I've been here 9 months.
I've met 2.
You've met 2. That seems impressive since you've only been here 60 days, give or take.
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I think there's a distinction to be made again, and you guys will have to forgive me. This is the future lawyer in me, but like we got to distinguish between concepts here.
Yes.
If you just put 100,000 people in this stadium, you're going to have super diverse viewpoints. If you're selling tickets, you're going to get 100,000 people who have some level of interest in watching this happen.
That's
right. So if you fill it with if you're like, hey, free event at DKR, like come out and we'll give you a free tote bag. And you're just like, whatever you want to make it. I don't know why it's a tote bag. And you just get 100,000 people in there.
Right.
Then the question becomes interesting, and I think in that case, after the first kill, you do end up with a whole people like walking out like, what the fuck? If you're like, they didn't tell me what this was, I didn't sign up for this, they're like, this is not okay. But I think that in the instance where you're selling tickets to this event, you preemptively filter out the most concerned objectors to this kind of event, and you probably filter out like a really, really big portion of the section of people that are on the fence about this. You're going to get some on the fencers, and then you're going to get some people who are like, this is fucking awesome. We should have been doing this the whole time. Right. Like we should always be doing this. This is awesome. So moving to the case where we're selling tickets, because I think it's the more interesting scenario because it's more likely to happen if this were ever going to happen, which it won't. Right. It never will. In the case where we're selling tickets, I still think that today in Austin, Texas, the first kill is going to get like either a hush or a groan from the whole 100,000 packed stadium. And I think it would sell out. I'll go there right now.
Oh, I would be there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's sold out.
I can't even tell you why I would be there. I just know I would be there.
No, and that's the other thing. Curiosity killed the cat, man. It's going to bring a lot of fucking people just out of curiosity. So first kill, you get a lot of people that are like, ooh, wow, this is real. And then the gladiator strutting around the fucking arena, and he's holding his sword and his shield up, and he's like, yeah. I assume, right? If you're a gladiator, you're pretty excited about chopping this dude's head off. I would think. I would think. You're like, this is what I came here to do. I got paid to do this. I chopped his head off.
I'm crushing it.
Yeah.
Gladiator maxing.
Yeah. You're like, fuck you guys paying for therapists. I'm cutting people's heads off. Yeah, so the gladiators strutting around the stadium, and that moment there, I think, is crucial to how the rest of the event plays out. And I think it's going to depend on the gladiator who does it first. And of course, it depends on all sorts of things. But I think that after the initial shock, in the instance where you've sold tickets and you've selected in that way towards people who are interested in this sort of thing, I think you get a slow cheer that picks up. Mm-hmm. It picks up slowly. It goes from the front rows up to the back. It's the front row ticket people. They've been waiting their whole lives to see this shit. So
front row ticket people.
Yeah, and we could get into a whole other conversation about what it takes to be in the front row at a gladiator match in today's world. But the nosebleeds are probably the holdouts, and maybe there's like this whole middle area where people are like very curious but not sure. But yeah, the front row, like this guy's strutting around, he's holding up his sword, it's covered in blood. He's like, yeah, fuck yeah. And I think the cheer starts in the front. And then, gosh, I gotta think it depends so much on like the people you go with, because like in each individual group, I could see it going either way, right? Like let's say me, you, Dom, and 4 other people go. 2 of your friends that you know with Dom and 2 people that I've met through Dom, and we all go. And we're surrounded by people we don't know.
Right.
I think it matters immensely how the people around us react to this like cheer beginning, how we react, and how we actually perceive the rest of the event, right? It's not just that we're going to openly react in the way we want other people to see us reacting. I think it also actually really affects the way that we perceive the rest of the event. And so I think like, personally, I think if I was at the event with Dom, we would be into it, like right away, right? This guy would, the first guy gets killed and the cheer starts, and I look at Dom looks at me, and we're like, yeah!
Fucking let's go, baby!
And in that case, I think the rest of you guys would be right there with us. I do, and I'm not trying to pass judgment here, but I kind of think that's the way it works. And so I think you get some walkouts. You do, no matter what. You get some walkouts. But I think that by the third gladiator match, I think you've got 65 to 70,000 people still in this stadium, and they're just fucking raring to go. They're ready. They want to see the next one. They've got someone they're rooting for. They're maybe placing side bets. Like, I think by the third match, everyone's either gone or they're fully into it.
So here's something that we haven't done in an episode yet, but Spotify has a new feature where every episode that comes out, there is a somewhere on the page of the episode, it asks the question, what did you think about this episode? Mm-hmm. But I can customize it. So I'm going to put something to the effect of like, what would your reaction be if you went to a Gladiator tournament? So even if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I think you can access this feature even if you don't pay for Spotify. Wander over to Spotify, and I'd really love to get some guest feedback as to what you think about this portion of the conversation, how you would react, how you think the stadium would react. If you're a YouTuber, you can just comment on this episode and say something to the effect of, in regards to the portion of this conversation around how I would react, how I think the crowd would react. Do you think this is an awesome idea? Do you think we're being fucking disrespectful for even talking about it? Like, I don't care what you have to say. I would love it if a couple of people would utilize YouTube and Spotify to the Apple podcasters out there. I don't think Apple has any way for you to really interact with us except to leave a review. But hey, if you want to leave a 5-star review and as part of that comment, talk about how you think you would react, I'd really love to get some other opinions on this.
I also will be fascinated to hear what you guys have to say. Like, I will be in touch with David about this. I want to know. I really do. I think it's interesting stuff, man. It's like, it's human nature. It's like we live in a world so disconnected from that, but how would we react? What would we do? I want to know.
Here's another
Send that feedback in.
Here's another question I was thinking. Does it matter who it is? So
Who's fighting?
Yeah. So what I was thinking about last night, it's funny because I was thinking about this at 1 a.m. when I was going to sleep, and I knew I was going to ask you this question. One thought that popped into my head is, what if there's 12 individuals who have been sentenced to death, and they are told, we are going to have the first ever Gladiator Tournament in X amount of years. Would you like to go out this way? Versus, is it 12 people who volunteered? Maybe a worldwide announcement goes out from the United Nations that says we are holding a gladiator tournament, volunteer, and there's 12 people who raise their hands and say, I will go to Austin, Texas, knowing that 11 out of 12 of us will die. Do you think the crowd's reaction would change knowing that it was volunteers versus people who were already sentenced to death anyways versus, I don't even know what the third category would be if there even is one?
My reaction would be massively different. Massively different. And I think, like, in the case where it's volunteers and these people are like, this is what I want to do, that's the one I'm going to. Genuinely, I don't think I'm going to a gladiator match where it's like, 12 people, they're on death row. We gave them the choice. They wanted to do it. You guys want to show up? Like, you know, obviously the advertisement would be a little more compelling than the little speech I just gave. But,
right.
But no, like, to me, that is coercive and I mean, I don't know that there's a better word for it. It's coercive in a way that would make me feel icky about being there, right? It would make me feel like, I mean, because, and the other thing is, like, on the other side of that, if I was sentenced to death, I would go that way. Yeah. No, I would sign up for that. 100% I would. But I wouldn't sign up to go to that.
It's funny, man, because I think last night I even felt conflicted asking you that question. Mm-hmm. But I just,
it's a great question. It's very interesting.
When I started the show, I just told myself, like, I just want to be honest on it. Mm-hmm. Like, so that when I was lying in bed, that's just where my head went of like, if it even happened, because to your point, it won't. Again, we're just two guys shooting the shit. But when you start to think about this stuff, that's just sort of what went through my funny little brain at 1 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, and I mean, as I sort of interrupted you there to say, I'm sorry, but it's a fascinating question. It's very interesting, and I, you know, as an ex-philosophy major and now a law student, like, I really do love that, like, questions like that where it's like, okay, so we've had this conversation now about this topic and how it affects human nature. What if we change it just a little bit, right? And this is a lot of what we end up doing in law school is, like, we read a case and then the professor gives us a new set of facts, a hypothetical. It says, okay, but how would you apply this reasoning to this new set of facts? It's a fascinating question. I think, and honestly, I'm not even sure that I could put into good reasoned words just exactly why the death row scenario is so much more repulsive to me than the volunteer scenario. I think it's, you know, there's a clear argument to be made, like, well, they're, you know, one's a volunteer and one's, like, much more coerced than the other. But at the end of the day, you're not being coerced into competing in this. You're being coerced into dying. No doubt, you're going to die. Mm-hmm. You're going to be killed. It's just like, how do you want to go? But that, to me, almost seems to cut the other way. It almost seems to be like
an insult, like we're using you, like, hey, oh, you're going to die anyways, and people could be entertained by your death, so let's fucking make a shit ton of money, and we still know the stadium will sell out. The crowd might be different, but that stadium of 100,000 people,
it's selling out.
it's still going to sell out.
Yeah.
So now is this just like fucking commercial of us? Like, we are so corrupt that now we're even commercializing the death of other human beings.
Yes. I think that's actually a really, really good way to sort of frame my internal objection to the problem. But I think what I was trying to say and didn't say very well just before that is that the fact that these people are going to die anyway, I think, could be seen to cut both ways, right? In the sense that you could see it that way, 100%. And I think I do tend to see it that way, which is like, this is sickening that we're using these people in this way. But I think the other side of it is like, and let me just ask you like a sort of side question. Mm-hmm. I know you ask the questions here generally, but Would you ever go and watch an execution? Like electric chair or lethal injection or just anything like that?
You know, someone asked me recently if I'd seen the movie Green Mile.
Yeah.
And I said no. And they said, oh my gosh, you should watch it. It's such a great movie, da-da-da-da-da. Except there's this one scene where they electrocute a guy. I think, I might be misinterpreting my words. So let me say they
Did you watch it yet?
No.
Okay.
They put someone to death. And so even though it started out, and they said it was sort of drawn out a little bit, like maybe more so than it should have been. And just that alone made me think I'll probably never watch that movie. And the reason why is because I vaguely remember watching Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I blocked it out or maybe it was just the movie was so long ago that I just genuinely don't remember it. But there is also a scene in that movie where I believe they took some electric paddles to his head. And I don't think they killed him. I think it was just like a therapy or something. But the electric chair specifically makes me very uncomfortable. I can't tell you why. I don't have a family member who was killed that way. That is an interesting question. That my gut reaction to the Gladiator question was yes, I will go. But would you go watch you take the most horrible person on earth and tell me I can have access to watching him or her die? I'd probably say no. I'd be like, I'm good. I'd rather book another podcast episode and talk about some shit.
So that's interesting. It's an interesting answer. I'd say a few things. First of all, Green Mile, fantastic movie. Very fun to watch. Like when I say fun to watch, like obviously, yeah, there are dark themes, but like I thought it was so well done. I really enjoyed watching it. Watched it with one of my college roommates, and I think neither of us wasn't expecting much. We were just like, we'll click on a movie, and then both like really came away from it like, oh, that was sort of profound in a lot of ways. I guess the other thing is like I get your aversion to the electric chair. That makes sense to me.
What's going through your head?
What's going through my head is whether or not I want this next sentence recorded for all time.
Well, if you want to say it, I can edit anything out, and I respect that. But if you also just don't want to say it because you don't want to say it, that's also fine.
No, I have no problem saying it. I'm more worried about like the way the world is moving. Okay, here we go. I believe that in some cases, the death penalty is justified. Let me say a little bit more about that, just that statement. I don't think that we live in a country or a system where we should have a death penalty because it's wrong so often. And I'm not saying it's wrong a lot or all the time or anything like that, but it's wrong often enough that a measure like that, which is completely irreversible, is a bad idea. Because we are wrong sometimes. Our justice system gets it wrong sometimes. And in those instances, or just forget the fact that we get it wrong sometimes is enough for me to think that we shouldn't have a death penalty. Because if you get it wrong in that case, too bad. It's over.
Right.
You lost that person, and maybe they were innocent. And that, to me, is just a horrific thought. Mm-hmm. That being said, if we lived in a world with a perfect justice system, or if we lived in a perfect world where you knew 100% if someone was guilty or not, I believe that there are some actions and some crimes which warrant the death penalty. I believe in that. And so, because I believe in that, I think that I should be okay with watching the execution of someone that I believe fits in that category. Right? So I'm a big believer in, like, I don't think that it's okay or right for a person to agree with something in theory but be unwilling to acknowledge or be around or participate in the practical implications of that theory. So my view is, if I'm okay with the death penalty, then I should be okay with watching it happen in the cases where I think it's just, which, again, in our system are none, I don't think. Just because we don't get it right all the time, and we don't know by the time someone's being executed 98% of the time, we can't be 100% sure that it's really the right thing. So all that to say, like, let's say we live in the perfect world, and let's say I could be 100% sure that this person did the thing they're accused of, and it's something so horrific that I think the death penalty is warranted. I think that I should be and would be willing to watch that be carried out for those reasons. Because I couldn't square with myself the idea that I'm okay with it in theory, but I don't want to watch it. Right? To me, that reflects a... Gosh, I'm not sure I even have the word to explain what I think that reflects, but I think it reflects a blameworthy difference between your theoretical views and your practical or your material implications of those views. And I think that it's not okay for us as people to hold views that we're not able to back up with actions with actions, basically. Right? So if I think that the death penalty is okay in some circumstances, then I should be okay with being very close or participating in those instances. And I think that the lack of that belief, and let me clarify real quick. I don't think that the lack of that belief is objectionable in any way. I think that the lack of conviction rather reflects that you don't actually hold that belief, that you're just saying you hold that belief. So to make it concrete, if someone tells you they think the death penalty is right in some situations, but they're like, I would never ever go to an execution, I couldn't watch it. I don't necessarily think that belief is objectionable. I think that it reflects that they actually don't believe the first thing that they said, which is that in some cases the death penalty is okay. I think really deep down they think it's never okay, and that's why they couldn't go. And if that's not the case, if they really do deep down believe that it's okay and they still could never go to watch it, then I think it's objectionable. I'm not even sure how we got to this point. I know we were talking about Gladiators, and then we started talking about... I asked you the question about, okay, now I know where we are. So
Yeah, you asked me, you said, I'm going to turn the tables on you, David.
Yeah. So I think the upshot of that, and I'll be real brief with this, is just that in the cases where I would be okay with the death penalty and therefore with watching it carried out, I'm not sure I can draw a clear distinction between that and why I would be not okay with the exact same group of people being told, would you like to be in a gladiator match? They say yes, and I go watch it. But for some reason, that still seems to me not quite right.
I agree with you 100%. If I knew that it was 12 volunteers, 12 humans raised their hands, and they were... That's the only... the 12 humans raised their hands and said, yep, I'll go to that event. Versus 12 people who were going to die anyways. Agreed 100% that would I still go? Potentially, but there would be, like, I could see myself almost being like halfway through the match and like maybe, like you said, death number 1, hush, death number 2, 3, we're getting into it. And then like maybe at death number 6 or 7, I'm like puking my guts out because I've now been here for like 30, 40, 50 minutes. I'm just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and that raises such a good point about even in the other situation. If you're going to this gladiator match and even if you're able to get into it, what happens that night when you lay down to go to sleep?
I'm drinking copious amounts of alcohol, probably.
Yeah, me too. I really would too, but then again, like that raises a question almost similar to my death penalty question, which is if you're willing to go to it, shouldn't you be willing to put it aside and say it's really okay and go to sleep at night and think that, but I'm with you 100% that like, I think I could get into it in the moment, but then I think when I'm home and I'm alone with myself and my thoughts, it starts to feel a little bit different, regardless of whether it's people who are, and obviously there is a huge distinction between people who are coerced into doing it and people who are fully like, this is what I want to do. But either way, I think you go home and it starts to feel just a little bit different than it did when you were there.
Yeah, I mean, and then on the other side of the coin, maybe I don't drink at all and I'm just sitting in bed pondering life the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Not pondering life, but I'm just thinking, like, would you be able to shut yourself down no matter how tired? Like, you would get such a rush that, like, if you, you know, I'm sure there are people who would, like, want to get high afterwards. There might be people who want to do shrooms afterwards. Like, again, it's 100,000 fucking people. You're going to have, you know, but I might be in the camp of, I might just be driving home. I might fucking leash up the dog and just do a few miles, you know, and just be like.
I might too. I think you end up being confronted with the drink and sleep or don't drink and don't sleep choice.
Right.
Right. Like, you're either going to get some artificial way to get yourself to sleep or you're going to be up thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, like, you know, in the ancient world, when people watched gladiator matches, watched executions, the first time, did they stay up that night? Did they think about the what they just saw and whether or not they were really, really okay with it as a person deep down? Does that get better the more you see? I'm sure it does, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, is the level of social conditioning to that being acceptable to the point where you go the first time, you're like, this is fucking awesome? Or is it that you have to go to 3 or 4 before you can fully put it in the back of your head?
How much do you know about Rome when gladiator tournaments were still being a thing? Is this something you've read about or studied at all?
No, I don't know a lot about gladiator tournaments at all. The Roman history that I know is much more surface level. It's more like, you know, this person killed this person and then they fought and here's what happened. And I do find that stuff fascinating, but the gladiator stuff is more just like a side interest. Like, I do think this is a fascinating line of conversation, but I don't know a whole lot about it.
What I was going to follow up with and ask is, when you think about the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, again, second time, it's a Russell Crowe episode. It's a Russell Crowe episode with the Matt Rife voice doppelganger. That's a weird combination.
Matt Rife, I'm really hoping you become unfamous, so I'll have to stop living with this comparison.
How often do you get that?
So I actually never got it until I was doing this fall litigation institute at the law school, where we work with current practicing attorneys on, like, litigation strategy. And I worked with the same attorney 2 weeks in a row, and the second week I walked in, she was like, "Oh, it's you. He sounds like..." And she, like, took a minute, and then she was like, "Matt Rife." And since then, I've heard it like 3-4 times. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
You know what I'm not going to do to you, but I sort of want to do to you? Not on the podcast, but, like, the next time we hang out or something, is pull up Matt Rife's Instagram or TikTok and have you listen to him for, like, 10 seconds and then make you repeat exactly what he just said to see how...
So I actually tried this the other day with a friend who was asking me about, like, you know, who was talking about the Matt Rife comparison, and the result inevitably, and this is just because we don't hear ourselves exactly the way other people hear us, but I did, like, start to do a little bit of an impression, right? I wasn't just like, let me repeat his words in my voice. I start to do an impression, and I don't know what the effect of that is in terms of how much I sound like Matt Rife.
How has it been? Do you hate that you're hearing yourself right now, or has it been sort of nice? Because for me, I hate the editing, but, like, in the moment, I love the headphones. And there was one guest who didn't like them, so he took them off, and I was like, okay, I'm going to mimic him to make him feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So I took them off. I didn't last a minute before I put them back on, just because there's, like, something comforting about having them on. Yeah.
So when I first put them on and we first started talking, it was a little thing where I was like, oh, this is weird. I'm not sure I like it. And I was uncomfortable for a few minutes. But now, yeah, it's like, I don't feel like, because it's almost instant, it is really instant feedback of hearing yourself. It doesn't sound that much different than the way I probably sound to myself all the time.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't hear the Matt Rife right now, if that's what you're asking.
I do. I feel like I have Matt sitting across from me.
The problem is that as soon as this, like, occurs to people, it's all they can hear.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I also haven't thought about it until you re-brought it back up.
God damn you, Matt.
God damn you, Matt.
The real problem is, like, I want to be a lawyer, right? So I can't be going up in front of a jury. Like, I'm gonna have to. And they're all thinking about Matt Rife. Like, that motherfucker's funny, but he's not. You can't take the guy seriously, right? So, like, I'm gonna have to be doing jury selection, and I'm gonna be going up there like, you ever heard Matt Rife? And they raise their hand. I'm like, you're fucking out of here. Say, get out.
Well, barely anyone knows who he is. So
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking guy's not even famous.
Most people that are listening to this probably don't even know. I'm just sitting here really enjoying this episode. Hope you guys are too. In fact, if you're enjoying it as much as I am, I'll go ahead and just use this time to get this out of the way. If you're listening on Spotify, please give us a 5-star review. If for some reason Spotify is not letting you give a review, it's just because you have to listen to an episode. So if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts or watching on YouTube, but you'd like to help us out on Spotify, just choose any episode, hit play, fast forward to the very end, and at that point, Spotify will let you hit the 5 stars and then you can leave a review. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you just got to go to the home page of the podcast, scroll down to the very bottom, and you'll see a place where it says leave a 5-star review and also write a written review. And for some reason on Apple Podcasts, I think that there is a gimmick where it will only post the 5 stars if you leave a written review. So please write a 1-word review or more. That would be a great opportunity to talk about what you thought of the Gladiator portion of the conversation. And if you're watching on YouTube and would like to subscribe to the channel, that would be fucking epic as well. That helps us out a lot. Just because I do think conversations like these are interesting. I do think it's topical and it's relevant. And I would love for Jack's episode to be heard by someone who's maybe wrestling with their own thoughts of, am I a pussy for not fighting anymore? Or I don't know. I just feel like this is a very interesting conversation. I'd love for people to hear it. And me and Jack did our part. All we can do is show up and have the conversation. It's literally up to you guys to spread this thing by taking 3 minutes out of your day. I'm not asking you for money, but if you did want to go over to the Patreon and sign up, I'm not going to fight you on that. But at the same time, like I said, I'm not asking you for money, just 2 to 3 minutes of your time to leave those reviews on all 3 platforms, even if you're really only engaging with us on one. And on Spotify, like I said, I think it's a pretty cool feature that they added in a place where you can actually write a response and it gets sent directly to my email. So if you did have any thoughts, not just about the Gladiator portion of this episode, but also the boxing portion of this episode, or anything that we're about to discuss as we wrap this thing up in the next 30 to 40 minutes, would love to hear from you guys. Whenever I get a comment, it honestly makes my day. Like, it's a cliche thing to say, but like, it just like, I get excited. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go edit. Fuck yeah, let's go record. So your guys' words mean a lot. Now I'm going to go pee and then we'll jump right back into it.
And, you know, as I said earlier, I would also love to hear feedback and love to hear what people have to say about any of those things.
Because I knew we would be talking about Rome, Greece, and a little that kind of thing. I wanted to shout out my buddy Tristan Hooper. He has this new clothing brand. It started here in Austin, Texas. It's called Forbidden. If you go to his page, it's www.forbidden.com, but it's spelled FORBIDD 3. So instead of an E, it's the number 3, NCO.com. And then on the back, it's a picture of a lady with like it's part of his insanity line where it's just different people from like insane asylums, and it's a pretty cool brand. It's new here in Austin, Texas, and I just wanted to give him a shout out because it's a teeny tiny bit relevant. Again, he's not a sponsor. I just love the guy and I want him to succeed. So
the shirt looks great in person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Not thank you, Tristan. You're welcome. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but yeah, it's a solid shirt.
Shout out to Tristan. It's a great looking shirt.
First off, thank you for being here. Thank you for this conversation. One thing I love about podcasting is it never, like, did you think we were going to spend a third talking about a boxing and then a third about gladiators and then a third about who knows?
Not at all, man. You give me a prompt, I just keep talking.
So the third thing, the final thing I wanted to ask you is, did you have a moment that you knew you wanted to go to law school, or why? Like, because this is a commitment. I'm assuming from the money, from the time, from the energy. Like, this ain't no little thing that you're doing. So why? What's the interest in law?
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't a moment. You know, I think in the process of talking about, learning about all this stuff, we're sort of encouraged a lot to talk about, like, the moment. What was the moment? When did you know? And for me, it wasn't that. I I went to college. I sort of, law school was always something I'd considered. I don't want to say always, but in high school, it was a thought. But it's not even real then. It's like it doesn't feel like a real. It's so far off, and I didn't have parents who were lawyers or anything like that. So to me, it was always like, who knows, maybe. I went to college, and as we talked about earlier, during COVID, I think myself and a lot of people were just, angry, disillusioned, sort of just not having a good time. So I thought, for a while, I just want to, go live on a ski resort somewhere. I want to ski. Maybe I'll live at the beach, follow a band on tour. I just want to, hedonistic type stuff. I just want to be happy. I just want to do things that feel good all the time, and that's going to be it. And actually, I think that boxing was a part of this realization for me, and a big part of it was just I hit a point, and it probably was just again development, maturing, realizing that no, that's not what I want. I want to do something meaningful in the world and help people out somehow, and provide for myself, for my family, do something meaningful. And I think that realization, along with, my experiences studying political science and philosophy, and what I have always felt like is my skill set, which is analyzing more complex arguments and text and stuff like that. And I think I do well with that. I think it served me very well in college studying philosophy. It served me okay here in law school. It's still, a big step up. It's a lot more difficult than what I've done in the past. So I felt like the combination of this desire to do something meaningful, do something important in the world, help people out, make a difference. When I'm gone, I want there to be something left in the world that is something that I did, somebody I helped, some sort of remnant of something meaningful I did. That combined with the sort of calculus in my head of how do I do that and how can I be effective in this world, and I think the answer for me is to be an advocate for people and to learn the law as best I can, and to advocate for folks who don't know that and who don't necessarily have the resources to otherwise exercise this option. And I think that's a way that I can have a really fulfilling life, is to, spend my life working and fighting for people who deserve that representation, who would not otherwise be able to afford it.
So you mentioned you want to serve people who may not be able to afford it. You also mentioned a term at the very beginning of this episode called impact litigation.
Yeah.
Is specifically what you want to get into. So for those who are listening, and myself, who don't know what impact litigation is, what does that mean?
Yeah, so, I'd like to preface this by saying I'm a first-year law student, so my explanation is probably not going to be as good as someone
It'll be perfect.
who's been after it for a little bit longer than I have. But impact litigation can take a lot of forms. So impact litigation might just be you're representing an employee in an employment discrimination suit, right? And you're arguing against or fighting against the company who has discriminated or has allegedly discriminated against this employee. And it can range from small stuff like that, representing plaintiffs in civil action suits, all the way, plaintiffs being the people who do the suing, all the way up to what the ACLU does, where they're arguing in appellate courts about issues of law and how the law ought to be interpreted in order to effect justice, and saying, some people read Supreme Court cases, some people just hear about Supreme Court cases, but that stuff is almost all folks who do impact litigation, who are arguing. So we had this really cool opportunity a couple weeks ago to hear from and listen to an attorney named David Hinojosa. I may be pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry, David, if I am. Who is doing some really, really important impact litigation work, and who actually had the opportunity to argue the affirmative action case in front of the Supreme Court this past term. And that sort of stuff just sounds so cool to me. And to be able to, I mean, obviously to argue in front of the Supreme Court would be amazing. Who doesn't want to do that, you know, in this field that I'm getting into? But the fact that David represented a group of students essentially who were saying that affirmative action, you know, was a good thing and was helpful for them. And so he got to amplify the voices of all these people who have had experience with the system that was on trial, essentially. When you get to the appellate courts, it's the system or the law or the policy that's on trial and not the individuals anymore. And he got to tell their story and to argue for them and to advocate for them in a way that, you know, of course with this court it ended up being, you know, almost a moot point because they didn't want to hear it and didn't, you know, had already made up their minds, which unfortunately I think is the case in a lot of high-level cases that the Supreme Court hears, that generally the justices have made up their minds because, you know, not to say they're not doing their due diligence of their job, but because they're legal scholars and longtime lawyers and longtime judges who have read this stuff and learned the material, and they know the material back and front before the case ever comes in front of them. And so a lot of the time the arguments are either feeding into what they already believe or not making too much of a difference.
Do you think that your desire to help people comes from anywhere specific? Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a moment, but like, do you see a lack of what you want to do in the system of lawyers who want to be specifically in impact litigation? Or do you just naturally want to help people and it's as simple as that? Or do you think it stemmed from some life event or series of events or something that you've observed as you've gotten older and started to grow up?
It's a great question. I think that people in general are motivated by lots of different things. You know, a lot of people are motivated by money or personal gain and I, you know, I'm not here to tell you that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. I think that there are plenty of people with really good reasons to do that, and, you know, they want to provide for their family, they want to build something for their people, and that can be very valuable. There are other people who are motivated by recognition, prestige, something like that. And I think that motivates me in part. You know, there is a part of me that wants to do something good because I don't just want to be another lawyer who made a ton of money. I want to do something that one day people look at and say, like, he really cared and wanted to do something meaningful. And I think in the other part, people are motivated just by that good side of humanity that you don't hear about all the time, but that really is, like, we care about each other sometimes, and some of us
totally
want other people to be happy and want to make the world a better place. And I'm very fortunate to have had some really impressive people around me, you know, when I was growing up and still to this day and very recently. And, you know, I mean, of course, what boy doesn't idolize his father? But my dad was such a hard worker my whole life. He's been a construction worker my whole life, except for 2008 when the housing market crashed, and he delivered newspapers and phone books for a while just to make ends meet. And so I sort of have grown up watching my dad work really, really hard in order to make sure that me and my brother had the opportunities and the good things that he felt like we should. So I'm inspired by that a lot, and I worked for the Charlottesville, Virginia Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, which is a prosecutor. So they work for the state, they prosecute cases. The elected prosecutor's name is Joe Platania. I think that Joe is an incredible person who really, and you know, he would tell you if you asked him, he thinks he's just an okay guy, but I think he's really being humble there. And I think Joe cares about the people he prosecutes and the community he protects in his position. And so to me, that was very inspiring because I grew up in that community, and it meant a lot to me to be a part of an office and a branch of the state government and a branch of the local government that really cared about producing the best possible results for the community and cared about the people they were interacting with. And in that office, I think that office was full of people who wanted to make the world a little bit of a better place and wanted to do something for their community and for individuals and for people that was meaningful, that meant something. And I feel very fortunate to have been surrounded by people like that in the field of law who are doing things within the profession that strike me as very meaningful and very people focused and community focused and community driven. And I think, a lot of times nowadays prosecutors get a bad rep, and I think, in a lot of cases this is deserved, right? I think that there's been for a long time a sort of system where prosecutors are generally rewarded career-wise and individually for winning cases. And that's not your job as a prosecutor. It shouldn't be. Your job is to deal out justice wherever you can and to do your best to enforce the law and to make sure that justice is done and to make sure that the law is enforced. And I think for a long, long time, and still in a whole lot of places, we've got a whole bunch of prosecutors who are just worried about winning cases and are worried about being the best lawyers they possibly can. And the truth when it comes down to it is that a prosecutor is not just a lawyer. They're an elected official and people who serve under an elected official whose job is to use the legal system to achieve their goals, yes, but to also represent the people that they've been elected to represent and to create good outcomes for community. And so I do think that experience of working in that office has really changed the way that I thought about what a career in the legal field can look like. And it's not necessarily because I want to do that. It's just because I think that I worked with a whole group of people who were so invested in community and individual outcomes and doing the right thing and doing good by other people that I was able to sort of incorporate that into what I want to do and how I want to be as a person and how I want to and the mark that I want to leave on the world.
Do you have any fear, and don't take offense to this question, or maybe I'll plant a thought in your head that you haven't had yet because you are a couple years from graduating, you haven't started trying any cases yet or anything like that. Do you have any fear or worry about, like, what if I become the lawyer that gets so caught up in the money and the winning cases I forget sight of my vision?
Yeah. I mean,
maybe I should ask that question again in like 5 years.
You should.
I'll have you back on a couple years after you've graduated and been like, where are you at, buddy?
Yeah. No, and but I think it's a great question. And I think that as first-year law students, a lot of us do go through this sort of near constant internal debate of like, well, a lot of us want to do something good, but we've got all these student loans and, you know, we've got personal goals and we want to live a certain way. And you go back and forth and it's not an easy decision, right? And I mean, you see it everywhere. It's not just the field of law, but like folks go into something because they think they can make a difference, and then it ends up being about how can I sustain myself, which is not invalid at all. It's, you know, a very valid concern. And we live in a world and in a system where you do have to work for yourself and you have to fight to sustain yourself for most people. And so I worry about it, yes. I believe, I basically believe two things that let me not worry about this too much. The first is there are all sorts of paths within the law where you can do good things and still do well for yourself. And the second thing is that UT Law is a school that allows me to have all sorts of really cool opportunities. I get the chance to do well and and have access at graduation to a whole bunch of jobs that a lot of folks, even at other law schools, are not going to have access to. And so my feeling is that there are jobs out there that exist where I can provide for my family and do the things that I want to do on an individual level while going to work every day and feeling like I'm doing the right thing and I'm on the side that I want to be on. And I think that UT is going to give me the access to those opportunities that I think everyone should have.
I'm going to pivot a little bit because we are running out of time, and I'm curious what your answer to this question is going to be. You're 21, so you're part of Gen Z, right?
I guess so.
I'm pretty sure you are.
That sounds right to me.
Do you have, in your opinion, is there any pitfalls that your generation is succumbing to?
Yes. I think that our generation exists at the gosh, I don't want to say the tail end, but I want to say pretty far along in this process of polarization and of increased difference among individuals. And so I think that it's especially easy for our generation, and with the way that social media algorithms work and the way that we are pushed into certain groups and pushed towards certain types of content, I think it's especially easy for my generation to only ever hear one side of the issues and only the side that they want to hear. So I think the biggest pitfall that my generation faces is being uncritical in our thought. And basically thinking what we're told to think from a very young age, thinking exactly what our parents thought, and then only ever hearing things that reinforce that view and extremely quickly dismissing things that don't reinforce our pre-existing views. And I think that there's such incredible value just in this world for any person to sit down and listen to someone that they profoundly disagree with. And listen with respect and care. And yeah, I think care is actually a really phenomenal way to describe the way that you ought to listen to people that you disagree with, is really think about, not just hear them out because you think you have a duty to hear them out, but listen to their points. Think about why they feel that way. Ask questions about why they feel that way. And get to the bottom of why they feel the way they do about different issues. And I think the reality is that we just aren't that different. And if you ask the right questions, and if you really delve into why someone disagrees with you on an issue, you're going to get down to a really minor disagreement on the fundamentals. And at the end of that, when you realize that what you disagree with is something small and basic and just like a worldview thing, you don't feel so alienated from that person anymore. You realize, okay, hey, maybe if I was raised a little differently, I could think that too. That's not unreasonable. It's just different.
I like that. This question comes from a prior guest. He was a Israeli Defense Force sergeant major, and he now lives here in Austin, Texas, who owns a portfolio business that mainly focuses on mergers and acquisitions. He has no idea who you are, but the question he posed to this mysterious guest is, what characteristic or trait, if you eliminated from your life, would make your life a lot better?
Well, that's a phenomenal question. Characteristic or trait.
Yeah, and then while you're thinking, his follow-up, the sort of second part to his question is, why do you think you haven't eliminated it yet? It's funny because as we were talking about earlier, it almost feeds into we sort of touched on it in a way of how you were thinking about how you didn't leave boxing because you were soft. Like you had other reasons, and I'm trying to think if there's something that a big one for me is and I don't know if this is a characteristic or a trait, To this day, dude, probably to my fucking deathbed at this point, because I'm 36 years old, I have a hard time accepting myself. It's a lot better now than it was in my 20s. It's 10 times better now than it was when I was in my teens. But every now and then there'll be these moments where someone will ask me a question, and in my mind, in like a half a second, I'll be like, oh my God, like I should lie to them, because if I tell them the truth, they're going to judge me. If they judge me, they might not want to be my friend anymore. Like, you just have this like great, and like I said, it's much better, but I have always wondered if there will be a day where I will be 100% accepting of myself to a point where anyone can ask me any question and I will just give my answer without thoughts of what if Jack or whoever the person is judges me for this. And that's something to the second part of his question where he says, why have you not eliminated this yet? That's something like, I don't think you can just turn it off. Like I would love to eliminate it. If there is an off switch to, if I could just do something where I am fully in acceptance of everything that I am right now, of course I would fucking take that pill,
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's a phenomenal question. I really liked, but it is a hard one to answer.
Yeah. I guess if I had to pick one, if I had to pick one, I guess it would be, I think that I'm often too lenient on myself in terms of like taking time off, like I just want to, today I'm going to lay on my couch and watch TV all day. And like, that's not to say in any way that there's anything wrong with that. I think that if I could eliminate it though, I would, because I want to do something meaningful, and part of what I want to do is being so well prepared and so well versed in all the issues and just prepared to like take on somebody's representation in a way that's really requires a ton of trust from someone to hire an attorney to basically represent them to the best of their abilities and in all of their interests. And so if I could eliminate anything, it would be my tendency to sort of cut myself slack in areas where I think I could be working harder. And I think that that's the case for me because I want to do really meaningful things for people. And I think that if I could commit myself 100% to doing that all the time, it would be important in a lot of ways. And I also, part of me knows that, it's good to take some time off, and you can't be effective if you don't have that time to yourself, but it's sort of a back and forth battle for me in that sense.
So since you want to be a lawyer, do shows that are predominantly about law, do you gravitate towards those or avoid them at all costs because you're spending so much of your time thinking about it that like a show about lawyers is the last thing you'd want to fucking watch?
So I don't actually think I have either strong inclination. I loved Better Call Saul because I loved Breaking Bad, and I love Saul. Like, it's so much fun to watch. And, of course, that's not the kind of lawyer I want to be. And, like, probably that's not the kind of lawyer anyone should want to be. And, like, I'm pretty sure we've already sworn, like, 3 to 4 oaths that require us to not do what Saul did on any number of levels. But, like, the show Suits, like, it's a soap opera,
That's
bro.
the
like,
one I had in my head as I asked that question.
Yeah, so, like, I have watched episodes of Suits. I've probably watched 2 seasons, and like, there are moments when it's fun, and it's like, who doesn't want to be like Harvey Specter in some aspect of their life? Like the badass who's at the top of their game and who's just like, you can't be beaten at whatever it is. And on the other hand, it's like, is it a good show? Not really. Like, it's pretty soapy. It's like very, they zoom in on someone's face while they're making an alarmed expression, and it's like, come on, man. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. It takes you out of your reality. It's one of those types of shit. It's entertainment. It's entertainment.
It's entertainment, and it's also like, you know, even if you wanted to be that lawyer, if you wanted to be Harvey Specter your whole life, like, you have to understand that it's so dramatized. Like, that's probably not how any law firm in the country operates, or that's just not what it is. It's not what the job is. It's not what you signed up for. So, did
you finish Better Call Saul?
Oh yeah.
So I just finished season 1, and I think on that vein, I might watch season 2, episode 1 tonight, just because it's in my brain now.
Have you seen Breaking Bad?
Fucking love it.
All the way through.
Yes.
Here's all I'm going to say about Better Call Saul, and I don't think this is a spoiler, and you can hit me if it is, because I really believe deeply in not
I'm not going to hit you because
like
you
this.
could kick my ass, so you can say anything you want safely.
So you watched Breaking Bad, and, you know, the last 2 seasons, it's like you didn't leave your couch, right?
Right. I did allow myself a lot of slack during those 2 seasons. I just called it sick to work, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better Call Saul, same thing. The last 2 seasons, it's like you won't leave your couch. It's phenomenal. It's like just riveting TV. And on top of that, I do think Better Call Saul is easier to watch, because Breaking Bad, the whole time you're like almost like stressed out for all the characters. Better Call Saul's got that humor to it. It's like, you know, Saul's the comic relief character almost in Breaking Bad, and so the show about Saul is much more, not much more, but it's a little more lighthearted, and there's more comic relief in the show for sure. So it's, you know, it's a little easier to watch in a lot of senses. But yeah, those last 2 seasons, man, the guys who write those 2 shows, like, chef's kiss. It's beautiful.
Would you like to end this episode on a lighthearted note and talk about Breaking Bad for a few?
We can, or I notice you have all the Game of Thrones books. We could talk about that too.
Okay, perfect. All right, Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad.
Or the Game of Thrones books, which I finished one. I'm not going to lie to you.
You've seen the show, though.
I've seen the show. And on Dom's episode, we did talk about Game of Thrones extensively. Okay. So that's why I think it'd be more interesting to spend.
Well, Dom's got no good opinions, but I'm just kidding.
What show did you like more? Let's start with that.
Oh, okay. Breaking Bad's the better show. Entirely because they ended it right.
That's a good point.
Game of Thrones for me, was much more fun to watch. I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. I loved all the characters, either loved or hated all the characters. I was so into it. It was so much fun. It's just brilliant. Amazing. And then they fucking shat the bed. They really did. And I would even offer probably more defense for the last season of Game of Thrones than most folks would. But even on that note, they just shat the bed towards the end. And I mean, to just take one of the most brilliant fantasy stories and one of the most well put together worlds and the best characters and the best character arcs and rush the ending, fuck you guys, man. Do better. You're better than that. And Breaking Bad did it right. The way that show ended was just it was perfect. It's how it should have ended. You got closure. You felt like it was at the right time. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't drawn out. They didn't keep making seasons after when it should have been over. You had a complete story, and when it was over, and it ended in a satisfying way.
So I have 2 moments that are coming to mind at the moment that I don't want to use the term they were my favorite moments because that puts a positive light on them, but was there any moment in Breaking Bad specifically where you were just yelling at the TV or just in shock or just and I can give you one of mine if you want a moment to
go
think.
Ahead.
So it was the episode when Walt thought for sure, who was the guy that owned the chicken franchise? What was his name?
Gus Fring.
It was the scene where Walt thought something happened, and Walt thought for sure Gus was going to have his whole family murdered. And so he goes rushing home, and he crawls into the basement to get the money so that they can get out of town. But Skylar had just given the $600,000 to Ted. And he starts laughing hysterically, and Skylar is standing at the top of the attic, and she starts crying while he's laughing. And you know that she doesn't know the specifics. And there is something about that scene, dude, where I was just holy fuck, holy fuck, like, TV and movies in general does not stir up like a lot of emotion in me. You know, it's like I said, like Suits. I've never cried over Suits. Maybe I'll chuckle here and there. There was something about that scene where I was just left like, it just stirred, like you can see it in my excitement probably, where it stirred something up in me where I'm like, guys, are you going to be okay?
Yeah. So, I mean, for one thing, there's just something to be said about like TV and movies are a relatively new medium.
Yeah.
And the way that the writers behind Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul have used that medium is brilliant, and I truly believe, and even more than I believe, hope that those shows will go down as like true classics in the realm of TV, and just fantastic stuff. I mean, it's really brilliant, and for exactly the reason you say, like, there are all sorts of TV shows that you watch and you enjoy even and really have fun watching, but never once are you sitting there like having an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And Breaking Bad does a phenomenal job of that. I mean, I think towards the end when Jesse is like just enslaved by this, like,
oh my God.
I mean, Jesse is in my opinion, the most likable character in the whole show. I think a lot of characters in Breaking Bad have the good and the bad side, and Jesse does too. But you just feel bad for Jesse the whole time, because Jesse is, you know, he's kind of a goofball, and he got involved with the wrong people, and he takes it seriously, but at the end of the day, he's in so far over his head the whole time.
Yeah.
And Walt and Gus and all these guys who are fucking egomaniacs, who are just so into it, and this world becomes everything to them, and Jesse is just, he's a good guy at heart, and he's in over his head, and so there at the end, man, when he's in that situation, like, I had a real hard time watching those scenes in the same way I had a hard time watching the Reek scenes in Game of Thrones. Like, that's just hard to watch.
Yeah.
And the difference is, like, I liked going into these eras in their character arc, I like Jesse a hell of a lot more than I like Theon Greyjoy. Theon's a piece of shit going into that, but you still feel bad for him.
Yeah, you do.
Jesse, you feel bad for the whole time, and then you're like, oh no, Jesse. Yeah.
The first time I watched Breaking Bad, I thought Skyler was a real bitch.
Yeah.
I rewatched it for the second time just this year while I've been here in Austin. How many times have you watched it? Two. Okay, perfect. So I'm curious if you can resonate with this or not. The second time I watched it, I felt so bad for her. I thought every time you wanted to leave him, your Skylar's gut reaction was exactly in the right spot every single time. And I think part of it, I read the book, The Gift of Fear. You ever read that one by chance, or has it come up? No, okay. And when I was watching the show the second time, they actually placed that book in this show. I was like, oh, holy fuck, it's on her nightstand. And the book, The Gift of Fear, in short, is about listening to your intuition and how accurate our intuition about scenarios is more often than we give our own intuition credit for. So between watching it, I read that book for the podcast, and then not even knowing it appeared in the show or had an influence on the show, I rewatched the show and I was like, dude, Walt's fucking evil. And Skyler should have left him. She was fucking right. Like, she should have got the fuck out of there.
Yeah, so I have mixed feelings about Skyler still. And I think, I mean, I think what you said is almost 100% right. Like, she's put in a shitty situation, and Walt is not a great guy. Like, you start off feeling bad for Walt, and as the show goes on, you stop feeling bad for him. Maybe you're still rooting for him, but you don't feel bad for him anymore.
Right.
I think the second time around watching the show, I feel bad for Skyler, yes. I think she's been put in a real shitty situation. She's she's in a world that no one really has to experience that often. Like, it's a unique premise, of course, and there are moments still in the show watching through the second time where I'm like, oh, Skylar, like, this is so
Sure.
poorly handled.
Sure.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
You could be better about this. And so in that sense, I do, there are moments where I'm like, oh, Skylar, the worst. But generally speaking, I think the overarching acknowledgement is like, who the fuck knows how you'd react going through this situation? And she's doing her damn best. And it's hard as fuck, and she's doing her best, and it's hard, and she's working through it, and for the most part, I mean, she's a way better person than Walt, and she, like, really gives a shit, in a way that Walt doesn't, and so, yeah, mixed feelings.
Sure, fair enough. Such a good show. It's one of, like, the few shows or movies where, like, if you could have one show or movie that you could completely forget and rewatch.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be on the top 3 for sure.
You know what's so funny? I think it would be top 2 for me.
What's the other one?
Sopranos. The Sopranos.
Really?
Yeah. I love The Sopranos. I'm a big fan. But what that brings up is I think the dead opposite is Game of Thrones. Because if I could forget Game of Thrones and watch it again, I would be so fucking disappointed in the last couple seasons again that I almost wouldn't want to do that. Like, I loved Game of Thrones. I had so much fun watching it. I loved the books. Like, it's just, in so many ways, it's the best fantasy ever created, I think. And I would go to the mat on that one if you wanted to. But yeah, like, to forget it and watch it again would just be to go through this, like, extreme disappointment in the last couple seasons again that I think would be not worth being able to watch the rest for the first time.
It's not even on my list. Agreed. 100%. We got 3 minutes left, and because you brought it up, I want to touch on it. You saw the book specifically, so I got through the first book. I'm currently in the middle of number 2, and I stopped because, frankly, man, like, I'm just fucking busy. Similar to you being in law school right now.
Oh, yeah.
But I loved it. Like, when I get free time and I'm going to read, that's probably the book I'm going to pick up. Did you read all of them, some of them?
All of them.
What do you think was better, the books or the show?
I mean, name a movie or TV show that beats the books it was based on.
It's never.
Never. Yeah. It never is. So, the show for the first... How many seasons was the show?
I think 8.
The first 5 to 6 seasons of the show were very well done, and the 7th season you could even argue was pretty good. You just don't beat books with TV shows or movies if you're patient enough to read the books, right? Like, a lot of folks don't want to read the books, and in that case, like, enjoy the fucking show, man. Enjoy it. It's awesome. It's fun to watch. If you've got the time and the ability to put in to read those books, like,
read them.
Fuck yeah, read them, man. I can't, like, I've read Lord of the Rings, like, too many times. It's an obscene
You read it more than once?
Oh, yeah. Harry Potter more than one time, many times. And so I really enjoy this sort of stuff. I enjoy it a lot. I think Lord of the Rings is fantastic. I think what Tolkien did in those books is incredible. The way he built out the world and the languages and everything is remarkable. It's awesome. George Martin did it better. And that might be a controversial take. Like, George Martin has done it better in so many different senses, but the main and most important sense is just that Lord of the Rings deals with all sorts of people who are idealized in their different roles. Mm-hmm. Game of Thrones doesn't. Or A Song of Ice and Fire. It doesn't. It's about people in the world they lived in, how people act. This is how people really are. It's how they really fucking act. And you've got really shitty people. You've got sort of better people who still make shitty decisions. And then you've got regular people who are mostly shitty, but they do have a conscience. And that's fucking awesome. And you've got a real political system. And you've got real... I mean, it's just... It's fantastic. For someone, of course, who thinks about the Roman Empire once a day, like, I loved it. I loved it all. It was so much fun to read. Like, it's awesome. George Martin, I know you're probably not listening to this, but if you ever do, please, God, fucking write the last couple books. We're all waiting for it. Don't fucking die on us, man. Please. They ruined the ending of the show, and you know it.
We need to read it.
You know they fucking butchered the ending of that show, even if they based it on what you told them. Do it better.
Do it better.
Please. For us.
You know what I did love more than the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Recording this episode with you.
This was fun, man.
Did you have fun?
I had a lot of fun. I'm so glad we did this.
Fuck yeah. All right, let's get you out of here. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy. Stay happy. We'll see you next Saturday on another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Peace.